Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of By the Numbers, the quintessential Counterstrike podcast. I'm your host Richard Lewis. Joining me as he always does is my co-host Duncan Thorin Shields, the esports historian. We've got Sam Davis pressing the buttons and doing all of that stuff. And right now, I'll just say right at the top of the show, there is a savage thunderstorm going on outside my window. And where I live, because it's sort of in the countryside. There is a chance there'll just be a power cut because of all the overhead power lines. So if for any reason I do just suddenly go offline, that's what's happened. So a storm is brewing.
Actually, I had similar weather today. It was like it had like a mad rainstorm out of it, but now it's actually pretty chill. It's sort of gone back to normal now.
And so lots to talk about in Counter-Strike. First, let's just...
If people don't know, last week, actually, because we actually tried to sort of book the habit of a lifetime and not start with all drama. So because we actually just talked mainly about I Am Cologne, it basically was just an episode all about I Am Cologne. So we actually never got to even any of those roster moves that were all projected.
Yeah, the roster moves.
Shit's gone down big time, obviously, yeah.
The PGL stuff.
The whole major thing, whether it's staying or going,
So, no doubt this is going to be one of those shows where we drop a load of behind-the-scenes stuff. Sure. And so looking forward to that. But first... just to give a shout out to the sponsors, we're going to do them in reverse order this time. Obviously, shout out to our VPN sponsor, NordVPN. If you want to get 70% off a VPN, go to nordvpn.com/RLS. It's a great product. We've had lots of positive feedback about it, so make sure you go and do it. But also a final shout out to .com/RLS. Obviously, you've been with us for 3 years. Worked with. They were the first major sponsor to come in, but we've been talking, and it's like a marriage in a sense. We're going to be growing apart from each other and seeing other people. I think we've been a brilliant sponsor for us personally, in the sense that they sponsored us to be mentioned on YouTube. And very quickly on, because I got reported by FaZe fans and Sargon of Akkad fans on the same day, little word of advice for your kids: never kick two hornets' nests.
It's a hell of an overlap right there as well.
Basically, they ended up not being able to be promoted in any way, shape, or form on YouTube, whereas everyone else in the world, including themselves, could promote and gambling sites, just not me, as told by the one time I spoke to a YouTube employee, because good luck talking to them. YouTube's a pile of shite. But anyway, despite that blow, they stuck with us through thick and thin, continued to sponsor us. They've never held us really accountable for any of the deliverables either, if I'm being honest about it. It was just a really good partnership. But time moves on, and me and Sam, we have a lot of plans about new types of content and stuff that's going to be coming up. So it's a space that isn't going to stay barren for too long. But regardless,
people can contact you or Sam if they want to sponsor, presumably.
No, it's all
okay. You've already got something going up. Okay.
Right. But anyway, they've been great, and still want people to support them just for their contribution to the esports space and the cool content they make. Shout out to them for the last time. If you haven't signed up, definitely go and do that to show your appreciation for all the years that we've been together. Let's start with petty grievances. Right, I know there's so many better things to talk about, but I'm stewing about this, mate. So I've got to be in my bonnet.
Okay. I just have to be good on this one.
Right, Danish CSGO leaks, Danish leaks.
But I can even give you some info on that one. I'm sure you've probably done something similar. What you do on those moves is, right, listen, one thing I'll never ever do is, if you're a legit journalist, Jacob Wolf, even cunts that I think is only borderline legit, like Nell, as long as you do your diligence on your report, I'm going to assume it's probably legit. You probably, even if it doesn't happen, it can happen to anyone. Maybe the deal changed. I'll just tell you straight up, Richard, I looked into at least one of the Danish CSGO leaks, and it was 100% nonsense. It was one where literally there was never any discussion of this guy joining the team. It was just that, I think the team had reached out to him, do you want to talk? And they never even go back to him. And that was reported by these people, Richard, as a plus this guy and a minus another guy. We cannot allow this. This cannot continue, because there was you'll know this as well. There is no individual human who would ever be allowed the track record these sites are going to have, and this person already has. And yet, because they're anonymous, it's just all fun and games. We can't run the scene this way.
And the thing is that, right, so first up, I just want to remind people that when DK was active, I mean, he's not for a variety of reasons, but certainly one of the contributing factors is just how, as with all journalists trying to do good work, the community treats them like utter garbage. But I remember that I think DK might have had one report in his entire time where it didn't come to fruition, but it was being, they were in talks or discussions at the time, and people never shut the fuck up about that. And every time DK leak, whichever publication he was with, or whether it was just on Twitter, went to the front page of Reddit, much like you get with our content now, there was a hardcore enclave of fans, many of them Nell fans, by the way. Nell showed absolutely zero professionalism towards a fellow journalist and encouraged some of the worst treatments towards DK because he is a petty bitch, right? So there was this like little tussle every time DK put out a leak. Remember, all of them correct. And people would upvote it, downvote it. They would bring up that one time it didn't come to fruition. Loads of people would insult DK and say you can't trust him, you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. Right. He had a stellar record. Now, I have seen none of that applied to these Danish leaks guys who've been on my radar because they got something wrong 6 months ago. I've just linked it to you there, Sam. This was when I think this was like maybe the first time I saw what they did. Now, this is how spectacularly bad they are with their information. This was at the end, like the middle of January, at the start of the year, and they said North were adding Roy and Refresh, right, and getting rid of Kriaz and Cajun B. And you can even see that Messioso replied to this, who was at North at the time, and was like, I don't know what psychedelics you're on. And of course, North went under the next month. The whole org fucking shuttered in February.
By the way, months before this, when I was helping the Flashpoint orgs try and find different people, I was working with Guild. Months before this news, it was already known behind the scenes, like North's basically done. They're either going to sell the parts or the entire org. So yeah, as you're saying, it's not even like if you were any rank of insider, this would be a plausible story. Not at all. Right.
So despite that, we knew that there was a ton of roster moves coming in the aftermath of Cologne, as is, the way. And for reasons beyond me, people keep upvoting this absolute garbage to the front page. They did a thread, right? Which, let's just recap what this thread was, right? So they did a mega thread after Cologne, right? Where they basically said the following moves were going to be happening. And it was that, hang on, I've got a list of them all here. It's just not loading for some reason.
I can remember most of them if you want them. It was like mega complexity instead of Rush.
I've got it. So complexity, we're going to get rid of Rush and bring in Magisk. Phase, we're going to remove Olaf Meister and bring in Zipnix.
Yep.
They did get the Astralis unlucky move correct. They seem to be, whoever runs the account, seems to actually be very good when it comes to tier 3 and tier 2. They've got a lot of the We Play Academy League rosters correct. And Dupree were getting rid of Nip were getting rid of LNZ and bringing in Dupree from Astralis. They'd also talked about MSL going to Fnatic. I think they had AZ in there at one point. They have thrown so much shit at the wall, and then people are going, but look, some of it stuck.
I know.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And today, because, understand why they're doing it. This account went up from having something like 277 followers to now it has, 6,200 followers. And they have been, no one I've ever seen in the history of esports reporting has ever been allowed to be this wrong this often, right? And still get plaudits respect. People are upvoting. People are even arguing in the comments, just because it hasn't happened now doesn't mean it won't happen. And sometimes they're in talks and it doesn't go through. Yeah, you learned that lesson when you were all fucking threatening to kill DK because he leaked something you didn't like. So yes, well done. That lesson is stuck. It doesn't apply here. This account has publicly said, by the way, This account is for all of the fans. If you guys hear anything,
oh Jesus,
do let us know. Well, what is the rigorous journalistic standard being applied there? Can you imagine me tweeting out, right? Oh, by the way, guys, if anyone's got any shit that they just want to feed me so I can get credit for it, please get in touch. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. And they're at today, because they have to keep it going, because they're like, fucking hell, 6,000 followers, are we a celebrity yet? Right? They basically have put out a regurgitation of a report that already exists. This is the next big leak, guys. According to sources, Astralis are in talks with Hunden. Really? You mean that thing that was fucking reported
weeks ago?
Weeks ago on HLTV. Not even, by the way, not even a site that likes leaks, particularly. So, and it gets worse, Duncan, because not only are they just regurgitating stuff that's already out there and clearly taking what we call in the business swag, a silly wild-ass guess every fucking time that a roster move might be coming, right? Get this. They got encouraged, right? Betway. What are you fucking doing, guys? Like, are you so... right, you're a massive entity. You sponsor loads of top tier, like, competitions. Everybody knows who you are. Are you that desperate for clout? You're fucking tweeting at a 6,000. It was 4,000 at the time. I think you tweeted this. Tiny little fucking leak account that can't even get its leaks correct. Look at this. Betway CSGO, Danish leaks. What's the next scoop? And the scoop was, right, as of now, Bubsky will stay and Lucky from Tricked will join Astralis, right? So, here's the problem with that, right? It's not even their fucking leak. It's not even their story because it was leaked before them.
They're basically, if people don't get it, the account, even though you're going to think they're joking, they're essentially co-signing this leak. They're sort of saying you were the first one with your story. Therefore, since it's happening, what's the next
Which isn't
leak?
true because on the 25th of June, right, that was all, this is 3 weeks later. Right, Danish CSGO leaks have announced it on July 19th, and Betway's doing, monocle emoji, have a look at this, right? There's a guy called Puffin CSGO. You probably haven't heard of him. He's got a blog. He leaked it on the 25th of June. Where's his fucking monocle emoji? Where's his front page Reddit post? But no, you've all just been enamored, right? All you have to do to fool you cunts into thinking you're getting inside information is just put the word leak in it. It doesn't matter if you've already heard the fucking story. You'll go, but it's a leak. No, it's not, mate. It's fucking not. It's been publicly out there for 3 weeks. Just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it's a fucking leak. Just because you haven't seen it before doesn't mean it's new information. How the fuck are these dickheads still getting upvoted to the front page every day? How? It's absolutely fucking shameless. And you're the same people who go, never any good content on the front page. You upvote absolute fucking garbage. Why 6,000 people have decided to suddenly follow a Twitter account that clearly has some ties to a bunch of fucking third string players, but that's about it. And literally every time they've gone from a tier 1 story, with the exception of Lucky to Astralis, they've got it wrong. Brilliant. Yeah, that's what I want. So that's my fucking petty grievances. The people upvoting that and discussing it and defending it are fucking morons. You know, where was your charity, right? When it was like, you know, a DK or Jacob Bull for, you know, me or any other person that's tried to do it. Never there. But Danish Leaks is the site now. That's the one. That's the one that's bringing you all the straight fire. That's the one you'll forgive for getting. I mean, they've already had 5 stories wrong. I've just read them to you. 5 stories. Like, think about what you would do with a journalist who got something wrong 5 times. I can't. They would. The threats, the hostility, it'd be outrageous. So
to me, this is just like a sign of the times, though, mate, because to me, the reason why people are cool with this account is because it explicitly doesn't have an actual human being attached to it. It does, obviously, but you just don't get any intimation of who they are, where they're from, what they're trying to do. And so because they take that out...
Another classic.
people have such a fucked up parasocial relationship with all the people in esports that they know that somehow the fact there isn't a human, there isn't a face, a name, somehow it means they don't attack it in the same way. Like, as you say, they uncritically just take the information as it was legit, even though the irony is, if you know anything about journalism, it's the other way around. Someone like DK is 100 times more legit exactly because he puts his motherfucking name on it, his picture, and he is the person he claims to have been for the last 10 years. That means that it's so unlikely he will go, you know what, I have actually been legit on a lot of these stories, but fuck it, should I just throw one out that's not even real and just see what happens? He won't do that because that would be pissing away all those years of credibility. So the fact that you let this account, yeah, it does. Listen, anyone in the industry, we think you're a joke if you actually think that account's like meaningful. I don't hate it in the concept of if you just use it as a hypothetical, like, well, what if Dupree did join it? Yeah, you can do something interesting with that, but that's not journalism, mate. Like, that's like just coming up with wacky ideas. You okay? Be a content creator if you want to do that. The reason I actually want to also like make a little bit of a tangent on this is if this was just CSGO, because obviously we had the Polish one before this, if this was just some stupid CSGO shit, I'd write it off. But this is actually the future of journalism in esports, Richard. I'm telling you right now. Yeah. Because in League of Legends, there's that other guy called Wooloo, right, who does the same fucking thing. I think it was either last season, off-season, or one off-season before that. A guy appeared with an account that was a no-name account, and it just started leaking information. And as usual, a bunch of it doesn't happen. By the way, Richard, he essentially implied that like Perks was going to join fucking Fnatic, a move that was never ever by any of the people who would be required to let it happen going to happen. Like, even if Perks himself had wanted that, it was never going to happen. Like, GT was never going to let it happen. But this cunt took the fact that it wasn't impossible and actually intimated like it could happen. Like this, it's another one of these accounts that's just playing God with journalistic like domain, but with none of the consequences. And the reason why I bring up that this is the future is because it's the same shit, Richard. People don't care that account's been wrong 10, 15 times. They don't care, right? And even worse, as you just said, get ready for this. Richard wasn't trolling when he said, "Am I a celebrity?" That's what happens next. Here's what happens. Someone who explicitly only got famous because they're an anonymous account giving you potentially inside info, what they immediately do, because they're all narcissists, is just go, shit, I should really find a way to sort of become famous now, though, because like people know me. And so the Wooloo account, right? Unironically, they joke all the time. Like, when will he do a face reveal? Here's my favorite one, Richard. They go, who is it really? Which famous person is it really? Here's a spoiler. Nobody. It's nobody famous, you fucking idiot. That's the whole point of the account. If it was someone famous and it was legit info, they'd just say it. And if they can't say it, then they can never be revealed, can they? So the problem is, people really want to believe that this is... It's also, by the way, I'll even tie it into, it is also almost like some QAnon level shit, by the way. People just really want to believe there's a secret insider that's giving you all the straight fire news. They probably even, by the way, if I had to guess, Richard, the reason the people who actually hate us probably like this account is they really probably believe all those like conspiracy theories where, you know, like we know that secretly Simple cheats, but we suppress it. And, you know, we know that like, oh, fucking, I don't pick whatever team you want, you know, FaZe should have kicked Olaf when they knew he cheated. But then we, you know, the ones that secretly think we're actually gatekeeping the info, you know, we do the opposite and give way more than we even need to on this fucking show, among other avenues. So yeah, I actually think the sad thing for me, mate, is this. If I look at the trend, because you see it, even like the reason why we love to use DK as an example, by the way, is because he has none of the elements that people would claim is why they're shitty to us. Like, he's never said anything political. He's never made an off-color joke. He's never been in any way mean to a pro player you like. But you're just as much of a cunt to him as you would be to all of us. It's just you don't have the excuse, do you? You don't have that shitty justification. So I have to say, the sad thing for me is I look in the future. I look 5-10 years down the line. Like, Jacob Wolf probably won't even be the guy breaking stories, mate. It'll just be these shitty accounts. They'll just throw as much shit at the wall as they can. Let's say they get good. 70% might hit, and then fans will just take the news from them, you know.
I mean, to put it into context, for those who don't realize how bad it can get, right? Over in League of Legends, there was an account that sprung up even before the one you're talking about. And
I know the story you're referring to, yeah.
And it was called, what was it, Bears Drink Coffee or something?
Something similar to that, yeah.
Yeah. Right. And basically, this guy was claiming to have all this inside information, claimed that they were like, you know, a former employee of like a big org and, you know, but didn't want to say who and all of this. And basically what they would do is they would do a leak. And every time it was wrong, they'd do a blog explaining why it was wrong, saying, oh, well, it just changed at the last moment because of this, this, and this. And then when it was right, they would go, as I told you last week, this happened. Right. And on it went. And it turned out, right, that it was this very seriously mentally ill League of Legends forum troll who went by the name Hydrogen Car, right? And basically, he was a serial stalker, an absolute lunatic. He'd faked that he was dying of some like chronic brain disorder and he was on his deathbed. That was his excuse for being a troll when he abandoned that account. Then he came back on that. Then he came back as fucking Bears Drink Coffee or whatever. All of his leaks were all fake, all made up based on guesswork. He had to fucking renounce himself. He had to then delete all the blog, delete all the posts, delete all the evidence. It was all completely fabricated while people were literally on forums arguing, going, but he was right about this. He was right about this. All got fucking played. And then he created another Twitter account, the name of which I won't say because I think it's still active, where it was QAnon bullshit. It was all about Trump and all about how he was fucking had all these secret plans and 4-dimensional Jenga, and he was doing all this stuff behind the scenes to shut down satanic pedophile cabals.
So this guy's credibility was shot, of course, yeah.
No, but here's the madness, mate. He had about 12,000 followers on that account.
Shit. Okay.
Yeah, what you don't understand is, right? like it's like a siren song. The fucking mentally ill call out with their fucking ravings, and other ill people on the internet just go and gravitate towards it and are dashed on the rocks of utter bullshit. Like, so, you know, that is where it ends up. If you think, by the way, like Danish Leaks is going to stay with a little, I'm a spy avatar, right? And fucking, you know, eventually it's going to be some cunt with a name and it's going to be their face and they're going to try and like do the great hustle, the great grift. But it's all going to be predicated on lies. You keep fucking upvoting this bullshit. Yep. By the way,
I actually got a side tangent for that if you want a really good example of the consequences that can happen. Because here's the other thing, right? It's all fun and games, Richard, when it doesn't actually affect the player. Like, for example, let's say they did say Magisk was joining Complexity, but at the moment, no one technically knows. Maybe he still is. Maybe he's going to re-sign with Astralis, right? He's probably not going to get fucked over by that shitty little leak, whether it's true or false, right? But I can actually tell you a story. I think it might even be the guy you're referring to. I'm not certain of the time frame here. A few years ago, when they were actually doing some roster moves, I think off the top of my head, I think I'm saying it's before 2018. I think that was the year. Basically, in League of Legends right now, arguably the best team in the European League of Legends is a team called Rogue, and their top player for them is the Romanian player Odoamne, who's played a long time in LEC. He's like a super veteran at this point in time, and he's always been one of the better players at his position, right? But earlier in his career, he wasn't always in the best teams. He was often in like the 3rd or 4th best team, and then he had to be like very, very good to like overperform or whatever. Basically, there was an off season where this fucking account reported that he was joining G2 at a time when they were signing very good players, and so as a result, this is real, because he stupidly bought into the community hype and memed it himself, Richard. He sort of made a joke like, oh, but, you know, almost like made a joke like, yeah, well, I'll see you in the off season, you know, some stupid shit like that, right? Referencing this meme. This is not a joke. The off season in League of Legends, it's more like sports. You've got a certain time frame you can sign people, and so it's like musical chairs. Like, you better get to the org you need to get to now, because if not, they're going to sign someone else thinking that you're gone. So this really happened. All the other orgs that would have given this guy an offer, including American orgs in the LCS for loads of money, all said, no joke, Richard, like, what, you're available? I thought G2 would sign it, so I've already signed a top laner. And he literally, no joke, had to go down a bunch of levels in his career, and he only just got back to being on the best European team this year. Like 3 or 4 years later. He had to he had to crawl through the pipey shit again to get back to the top of esports. Like, and that was, listen, it wasn't entirely the fault of the account. Like, he certainly shouldn't have memed it himself. But that just shows you, like, there can be consequences to this as well, making shit up. It's not like there's no.
Well, that was going to be my other point. You know, like, put it this way, because esports orgs and management are fucking lazy and try and get information about what's going on from social media themselves rather than pick up the phone. There's no doubt in my mind that eventually, if these bullshit leak accounts keep just throwing stuff out there, it's going to cost someone an opportunity. It's going to cost someone a job. You know, like, I don't know who it'll be or what level, you know, it's going to be at. But you will get a story like that in CS where it's going to be someone was about to offer someone a contract, but, looks like they've agreed terms, or someone's going to say $30,000 contract agreed. It's going to be something like that, and then someone's not going to get a job because of it. Because some fucking kid, and I guarantee, by the way, I guarantee you, there is no way, whoever is running that Twitter account is over 18. No way, by the way. I would bet my left testicle on it, not the right one. We've been over this. My right one's my favourite. It's the bigger of the two. But I will bet the left bollock on it, mate. There's no way. It's got all the sticky fingerprints of a fucking kid that's just playing at being a fucking journalist without any of the thoughts about any of the consequences or anything like that. And eventually, right, if it all comes crumbling down and people start backlashing against them because they get a big story wrong or they get called out by a player, like woe betide, by the way, someone like Olaf comes out tomorrow and just fires a shot across your bow, because I'll tell you, all that popularity you built up, it goes away in a fucking second if a player calls you out. So you might want to think about that. It's one thing when it's another journalist. It's one thing when it's a manager. It's even one thing when it's a commentator. If a popular player says you are lying, you are fucking done. And all that'll happen is the person behind it, who will never know, will just slink off, and that account will be just given to somebody else. And it might even be repurposed. It might become another gimmick account for something else. So enough's enough, guys. If you feel comfortable upvoting that absolute trash to the front page, right? I don't want to hear. If I ever see anybody fucking going after like actual journalists again, like I'm gonna go fucking thermonuclear. It'll be like 2013, 2014 Reddit Richard Lewis. Like I'll go fucking mental. It's so outrageous that is what's being held up as like our insider journalism in CS right now.
By the way, though, I will say the sad thing is you've actually just nailed up the easiest way to end this tomorrow, which is pro players just say, I'm not involved in that deal at all. Why are you making it up? Of course, none of you can do that because you're so stupid. You spunked your load over the last 10 years doing that to people like Richard and DK when it was totally legit. So now guess what? None of you can be believed. So even though I agree, if they came out, it'd be great, Richard. The problem is I've just seen them do that too many times when they were actually lying to pro players.
It's true, of course. Of course.
You know, this is why we can't have nice things.
So let's do the other big story, because I know you've got loads to say about this one. I mean, we had to miss it off last time. But basically, for those who've been following what's going on with the major, it's been back and forth and back and forth. We're still not really sure as of the latest statement that was put out today, which we'll get into. But just to give you the long and the short of it. Right. There were two major esports events to be held in Sweden, one of which, of course, was the International, often referred to as the Super Bowl of esports, has the largest esports prize pool for Dota 2. And, of course, Stockholm was the setting for the CSGO major. A great setting, a great choice. It's going to be the first major in a while. Sweden obviously has this incredible history in CSGO. Stockholm's a great city. So lots of reasons to go ahead and do it. But unfortunately, the ongoing issues around COVID have created something of a standoff. And it was a standoff that actually led to the cancellation of the International, which is now being moved to Romania. So what happened there? Well, basically, again, to keep it brief and to summarize, in Sweden, they have a special dispensation for sporting events and for sporting competitors, in that the stringent COVID protocols that they usually enact for all of the things, they're willing to forego with certain protections in place so sports can occur and people in a limited capacity can attend those sports. Obviously, that's because sports is not just hugely important to people, but it is a huge economic driver in all of the countries that have like domestic leagues or the sponsorship that's associated with it. And in that sense, Sweden is no different. Now, where does esports enter into it? Well, esports, despite Sweden being one of the progenitors of esports as we know it in the West, they have never truly, on a legal level, acknowledged that the esports and sports are the same. And as a result, this failure to acknowledge that means that esports competitors do not get this dispensation. And so when TI was faced with bringing players and staff, a huge mammoth undertaking in international, as I'm sure you can imagine, you're talking hundreds of players, hundreds, maybe even over 1,000, staff, all these moving parts. Then not to mention, you want to have a great crowd there. So all of these aspects were basically deemed impossible because you don't have the sporting dispensation. Now, they told Valve, did the Swedish government, that they were going to have a meeting to discuss esports getting this dispensation. And they had assured Valve that, yes, obviously, with our history and the similarities, esports is going to be recognized as a sport and you'll be perfectly fine for the international. However, not only has this not happened, it hasn't happened in the timely fashion that they needed it to happen so they could start the logistics of organizing TI. That has now led to what would have been probably the largest ever esports event in Sweden, no longer being in Sweden and going to Romania. So naturally, with another one just round the corner, suddenly the Swedish government, and indeed the mayor of Stockholm, is like, you're fucking killing me here. Like, this would have been a huge revenue, huge money driver, a sign that we're getting things back to normal. I'm into esports. What's going on? But the Swedish government have stood firm, and basically they've said, look, we're going to have a meeting. We are going to get round to it, and we're going to make a decision. The problem is we're running out of time because we need to get CSGO Major planned, up and running, as it's due to start at the end of October. These things do take time. And as it happens, even as of today, in the latest statement put out by PGL, we're still in limbo. I will read you that statement before we start giving you some little saucy and spicy bon mots from behind the scenes. The PGL CSGO Major Playoffs will take place in Stockholm if the local authorities can make the event accessible to players, staff, and fans. That is what PGL have stated. And they refer to two key deadlines, August the 23rd and September 15th. August 23rd is when they are hoping changes to the temporary entry ban are going to be made, which would allow all players and people supporting the event to enter Sweden. And then the second deadline of September 15 is that PGL are hoping Sweden will lift restrictions for indoor events. If these two things occur, it's going to be mostly academic whether or not esports is recognized as a sport moving forward, because an event is an event is an event. And that's where we are. But PGL have vowed there will be a major this year. If it has to take place in Romania, it will. And they are going to start selling tickets on September 16th, wherever it's going to be held. Not ideal, but better than a lot of outcomes we could have had. So, Duncan, over to you. I guess we'll start by talking about this insane palaver from a country that, first of all, should be reverential of esports, given the part it's played in it and all the things esports has in turn done for Sweden, by the way. But also the idea that at a time when everyone's economically on their knees, you're going to turn down these huge money spinners.
Oh, outrageous. I mean, to me, what this actually shows, I hope people are going to consider the wider point here, because you'll notice the same point applies outside of esports and across everything for the last year and a half or so, which is it's nothing to do whatsoever with whatever government regulations are currently for events, for meeting, for what the situation with like general people going about their lives are. All it's to do with, as you can see, is how big is your industry? How directly does it benefit or harm people who are themselves very rich people who might be donors to political parties, politicians themselves, if they were involved with stock, or they maybe had like a fucking cousin or a work partner who works in that field with a stadium or so. Basically, as far as I can tell, what you're learning is what I've said to people a lot the last 5 years, which is don't get out of pocket and think esports is 10 times bigger than it is. The news story stories make it sound like it's 10 times bigger than it is. These are the moments you realize it isn't big as it's pretending to be. Because as you can see, there are plenty of sports. I bet you don't even need a sport, Rich. I bet you could go something ridiculous like, like World Poker Tour or one of those. I bet someone like that could even get the win, because I tell you what, the casino people probably have the right connections to this person. I bet all these like things that you would think would be way smaller than esports in terms of like raw viewership could probably get into these countries. What it's showing me is a lot of people in the esports industry, they don't have those connections yet to the politicians. They don't have the big business people investing. Because there's another thing. That's one thing I learned a while ago, which is once big enough people, because I actually was naive. I used to think like everyone else that esports getting bigger would be when the companies in esports got bigger. No, what happens is esports is only going to be considered bigger when the big people in the mainstream just directly buy into esports. When they do that, the next day it becomes legit. And what will happen then is, this is one thing that you might have already started to notice has turned the tide in America, but I said this 5 years ago. I said when they not only stop with the stories that like all video games cause school shootings, but they start going the other way. They start putting out the stories saying, actually, is it really to blame for that? That's when you'll know that like the video game industry and esports are connected enough and high status in society enough that people stop with like the nonsense sort of like smear stories. So similarly, this to me shows that even fucking Valve isn't actually like politically on the level that you'd think that esports would be at, because the idea you can't bribe someone, you can't, by the way, the idea you can't just legit get it through is kind of mad to me. And the whole way this story's been set up, the reason I make this very clear at the beginning is because everything that follows, everyone else is coming with these assumptions, Richard. Oh, but the politicians want to do it. Oh, and X, Y, and Z. But I do what I do with every story, mate. I just go and I check the timeline. No one else does this, of course, because they're all fucking morons. So when I went and I checked the timeline, Richard, I saw you're going to be told now in this story about how all these politicians have been working diligently to get the major there and how they recognize what went wrong with the international. No. Notice how in Richard's story about the international, it's Valve pushing it the whole time. They're the ones meeting with them. Right? So here's this timeline. I've looked it up here. On the 13th of July, Hitcham Chahine, I think he's the CEO, is he? Let me check.
Yeah.
CEO and owner of NIP. By the way, literally one of the guys behind all that scam shit with Fiflar and nothing in PayPal. Literally the guy behind a bunch of that stuff. He basically did a tweet where he said that like the Swedish like Prime Minister, I think it's the Minister for Sport and Culture, or whatever, who did end up getting involved with this story, Amanda Lind.
Yeah.
And some other guy, another sort of minister, he said basically like they invited them all to come to the NIP office to learn about esports, right? Coincidentally, Richard, something like 2 days later, one of the people he named invites PGL to come and have a meeting about all the esports stuff. Then you have other stories come out where he's sort of like bigging them up for all the things that they're doing, NIP people again. And here's one detail I've got for you, that when you see this, you're going to understand later why I'm going to come with some wacky angles for you. So there's a tweet I saw here. It came out a few days after that. It was on the 19th of July after the minister announced it. And it's someone called Vincent Lutz. I won't tell you who he is until we've read the tweet, right? The tweet says, the amount of work behind the scenes being done to save the Stockholm major is phenomenal. And many people are missing their holidays to fight for it. We won't give up. Now, when you click on Vincent Lutz, he is a NIP marketing aide, right? First of all, if NIP isn't involved with this, I'm getting really sick of people who work in the NIP org and trying to take credit for things and trying to constantly fucking self-aggrandize what they're doing. And here's the angle, Richard. I'll take it at face value. And I'll ask you this. Why is one team, a team which, by the way, historically does have connections to Weezer and all sorts of other people, why is one team from Sweden leading this spearhead? Why would they need to? Remember, if the politicians are into it, they wouldn't need to be told by a daft cunt who steals money to get involved with it. They'd know it was an event that they're about to lose. If that was all legit, why would we need NIP to be the ones spearheading? Why? I've got a crazy idea for you guys. Can't PGL do it? Because this is nothing to do with PGL and the majors, as far as I can tell. It is in a way, but it's all about the optics of who saves the major and who decides where the major is. And that's an entire different conversation. So there we go. I've sort of teased people there initially.
Well, so we'll get to that next stage, because obviously with it being esports, everybody, there's always this insane degree of fuckery. So it's been reported in Expressen, which is a Swedish rag. It's a Swedish tabloid.
Yes.
And if you remember, of course, Expressen themselves historically were the just a little bit of background here. Expression was the publication that had the journalist that had all of that stuff about NIP and Heaton and the bankruptcy and the bullshit.
Yeah.
And they contacted me, contacted other people that were on that story, and then just never ran it. Never ran it. But have recently.
I've noticed in Nordic journalism. It's weird how that works, isn't it?
Yeah. But have been running lots of very positive stories about NIP, incredibly, even now to this day. So
that's another example where esports fans are utter cretins. They will believe the literal equivalent of the Sun and the Daily Mirror over like the most legendary journalists in the space.
Yeah, of course. So one of the things that's been put out there is this idea that PGL don't want to resolve the issue. They'd rather have it in Romania. And this is a particularly strange and
that it's like a loophole for them to just have the major in their home country, and that, you know, Valve wouldn't let them, so they're going to pretend that they're not allowed it in Sweden, so they can they secretly always wanted it in Rome. That's the implication for people. By the way, I would just say this for fans out there. No fan would come up with that idea completely out of thin air. It didn't. You were given that idea as part of a set menu by people who want you to think that. I hope you understand that as we have this conversation.
Yeah. So there's this strange, pernicious, and it is a lie, and it's a lie by any sort of. I mean, you don't even need to know it's a lie to know it's a lie, right? Because think about it, right? PGL have had the serendipity to be the people doing the first major in a while, coming back. The great comeback to LAN for CS, because listen, best will in the world. Cologne was good, but it wasn't the return to LAN.
Yeah,
it's LAN when you're on a stage with a crowd cheering, the pressure, the noise, you know, all of that, right? It's LAN then. That's LAN. Okay? But there's this thing going on behind the scenes where everyone's going, PGL really don't want that. Think about it. Sweden, Stockholm, CSGO, first LAN back, and apparently they don't really want it. This is the rumor that people
even a super historic venue would be incredible. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Apparently, what they'd rather do is go to Romania, right? A country that they know very well. Silviu's obviously from there, PGL's based there, and run just another event. And actually, what they're doing is it's PGL that are to blame, not the Swedish government, not the Swedish politicians. It's PGL that are doing this. And this is where it starts to get crazy. So I'll read you the Expressen article. Again, apologies. This is Google Translate, but you'll get the gist of it. It says here, according to information made available to Expressen, PGL's view has always been that it isn't possible to carry out the tournament without guarantees for visas for the players from the Swedish government. That demand has been inflexible. Now, by the way, that is absolutely fine. I think.
Reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, of course. Like, why you're having an athlete travel to your country, do the proper paperwork. Why, if you can't guarantee a visa, what happens next? If you can't guarantee a visa, equally, I can't guarantee the player, well, you're not going to get deported or get into trouble that could have ramifications that could prevent you traveling to the country for years to come. No, get your shit together. Give these athletes the proper visas that they are entitled to have. Simple as that. But anyway, according to information available to Sports Expressen, this isn't the only reason PGL are being inflexible. Several well-placed sources have accused PGL of trying to force the tournament away from Sweden and have opposed attempts to resolve the situation. According to one source, this is due to a cooperation between the organizer and the Romanian government. They do not want to solve it, the source says. They continue to say they need more guarantees, but they really want to move it to Romania. Ninjas in Pajamas, the Swedish Esports Association, and the finance councillor Anna Konig-Gelme are some of those who have appealed to PGL to please keep the tournament in Sweden. So all of the coverage coming like at this time where they're having this negotiation is all about how PGL just secretly want to move it away.
Oh, it's browbeating, yeah. It's telling, oh, it's all you just doing this. It's all your fault. You're the one holding up this tournament. By the way, as Richard just said, let me just reframe all that into a non-cunt version of English. Someone's just seen the biggest tournament in the entire world in esports completely unable to happen with anything approaching vaguely even sort of like goodwill towards you. Never mind guarantees that the event can happen. With, by the way, the game developer themselves, a multi-billion-dollar company which has literally like some of the highest paid employees in the entire world, incredibly influential in the modern digital world. If you don't care about those things, why would you care about a little company from Romania that was it back in the old school of esports? Then what happens is this company thinks, I mean, there's literally nothing to suggest we can get the event done. Instead of it being the Swedish government have yet to give any sort of like tangible real world guarantees which would allow the Romanian organizer to host it. No, it's all presented as they secretly don't want to run the event there because they won't risk literally millions of dollars to run an event which might not even have all the players at, and you ready for the punchline, could just have an empty stadium. Why the fuck would I want to lose millions of dollars on my major in an empty stadium in Sweden with half the players? Why would I ever even, if that was even on the table, Richard, I'm walking away from the table. I'm going to say, unless you make it the other way around, you have everything nailed down, I'm going to go wherever it might be. If that happens to be Romania, by the way, mind your fucking business, none of your business. You didn't allow me to do it in your country. There's even an element, by the way, which is almost like they've almost slid in underneath there, like a xenophobic element as well, of like, and of course these bloody Romanians want to take our major. And you know what? NIP's not happy. Why the fuck would NIP be relevant to a story about the Swedish government and a company called BGL? Notice even the way they frame it. And a bunch of us, there's at least 3 or 4 of those groups of busybodies that have zero involvement in this, and they aren't even listening to our opinion. Who the fuck are you? First of all, name on record, otherwise you don't exist and you do not matter. So every name that wasn't mentioned there, you don't exist. You could be pulled out of this guy's ass. You're a fucking tabloid rag. You aren't even legitimate journalists. Then secondly, this whole angle that it's framed constantly as though PGL are the arseholes. By the way, have you noticed how there's not one shred of evidence actually supports their story? There's not even a theory. There's not a single person in the entire industry who's even hinted at that. You think people like ESL love PGL? Of course they don't. They'd squash them like a bug tomorrow if they could. But even all the big mouth cunts at ESL have said fuck all about this story. They just sort of sat back and gone, might just see how this plays out, actually. They're not even saying anything. They're not even hinting anything. No one's even some of the people who clearly act as though fucking Carmack's hand was up their ass working their mouth. Even they're not magically dropping hints on shows anywhere. Nowhere. You're not hearing anything. So this whole story, as far as I can tell, which is just fabricated from whole cloth. I've yet to see any reason that implies it. Tell you what, of all the people in esports, line them all up who your favourites are. People who've worked at DreamHack, people who've worked at ES. I'll put Sylvie from PGL up against any of these motherfuckers. I've never heard a single story ever reported where this guy wasn't legit, where this guy ripped people off and where he did all shit. It's the other way around. I could find you dozens of people who tell you like he did X, Y, and Z for them, went way above and beyond. He's even in business considering most one of the legit people to deal with. He's just super easy to deal with. He's not like ESL, who, by the way, to this day, ESL will do negotiations where they'll take the de facto #1 caster in the world in CS, sit them down and explain, I'm going to need you to lower your rate for this next massive event that I'm then going to go to the public and sell as my biggest event. They still do that to this day, guys. They still even nickel and dime your favourite casters as though they were the shitter from tier 2 that desperately needed the event. So the idea that you're just going to besmirch with zero evidence in a fucking tabloid rag from Sweden, people who are super legit in this industry. By the way, you were even there, Richard. I said this guy should have been like one of the first ballot Lifetime Achievement Awards from those esports awards. By the way, spoiler, people like him will probably never get into these awards, and it will be the other way around. You will see the cunts of the world get those spots. People like me and him will never be in these award shows. We'll just wait and see.
I mean, like for me as well, though, you the one point you've touched upon, but then sort of like, you know, kind of only alluded to. So I'll just say it. NIP being involved has a weird, almost sinister element to it, because what you have to understand is there are a number of organizations that have very close ties to ESL. And it wasn't that long ago that this whole Flashpoint drama was happening with NIP and Anonymous, and that was there. That they were behind the scenes saying, listen, Flashpoint, we're juiced in with all the Louvre teams. They'll all be on our side. That's the Louvre agreement, which is the historic agreement that you sign if you want to be part of ESL and their pro league. And that was very much a threat. And Hitcham Shaheen is somebody that's very much, I don't want to say an agent of ESL. I think that's probably overselling it. That's pushing it a bit too far. But certainly, I can imagine a world, because I've worked in esports for 17 years, I can imagine a world where all of this public posturing Ninjas in Pajamas are doing, all of this intimation that PGL are actually the bad guys and they want to move it to Romania so they can save money or whatever the fucking, or, you know, or get a big fat payout from the Romanian government for delivering a huge event to them, or whatever the angle they're going with is. I can imagine a world where Ninjas in Pajamas are happy to have that intimation because it actually serves their interests. Because PGL are not ESL.
Yep.
NIP get to go to the major if they qualify. It doesn't matter what type of business relationship you have. Whereas we know if your business relationship with ESL isn't savvy, they'll just take your league slot away and feed you to the fucking wolves. And then go, but don't worry, you'll have a chance to re-qualify on diminished terms, maybe in a year or two, eh? Chin up, lad. The Lannisters send their regards. And so, yeah, there's something not right about this. I know for a fact behind the scenes, PGL have always looked at Romania as that sort of almost like we don't want it to happen. It's the second option. But if it's a choice between no major or a Romanian major run by PGL who know that country inside out and are connected at the highest level and will deliver an absolutely amazing event, it's no choice at all. We've got to get back to fucking normal soon. We have got to get a seriously sizable CSGO event under our belts soon. How long are we going to leave it? It's been, if we don't have a major at the end of this year, it'll have been 2 years. Yes. We are losing ground. We are losing players. We are losing sponsors. We are losing teams. And people are losing interest in the greatest esport of all time because we cannot deliver what was our bread and butter. Amazing fucking moments in a stadium in front of a crowd. So if you're telling me, if PGL turn around tomorrow and go, we couldn't make the Sweden thing work, but don't worry, we'll fucking nail it in Romania. All hail PGL, and I hope the community will go and support them. But I'll tell you, there'll be more smear work coming. There'll be more write-ups. Expressing will be all over it. How PGL betrayed Sweden and let them... You believe me, it's there. There's something sinister at play here. And I know the bullshit. I've seen it. I've seen it too many times. I've seen the politics. So if the community want to get swept up with that, which they probably will, because let's be real, they think fucking Danish leaks is a credible fucking source of journalism. So, yeah, probably actually people will be going, God damn PGL letting us down. Oh, God damn it.
The reason I believe they will is because, as we discussed, I think it was on the last episode, people love monopolies. The modern generation is totally like put it this way. I'd love to go back in time and just show someone like a fucking scrying mirror into the future who was at like Occupy Wall Street in like 2008. Like, oh, get ready for this, mate. Look what the world's like in like 14 years. Like, what the fuck? So this was all for nothing? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It goes the other way, if anything, mate. Forget anti-corporate sentiment. People start loving corporations just because they put a flag up for a month going, what? And do they stop all the evil shit? Nah. They just rebrand it. It's like, what? Because basically, the joke is this.
They don't even put that flag up in the country that's doing the evil shit.
Basically, think about it. I guarantee you, if you actually ask those idiot fans, what's the solution? They just go, just let ESL run all the majors. You know what I mean? Like, ESL's just in some mad, untenable position on Reddit. Like, they just worship them at this point in time. They can even do all the same mistakes. It's just cool because it's just ESL, isn't it?
It all boils down to the same thing. It's because they pander. It's all anyone ever cares about. It's not what work you do. It's not what you deliver. It's not how good you are. It's all, will you pander to me? The all fucking important vector in everything. I am the thing that matters. right? And so ESL, every event, they're there, they pander. Someone says, I don't like your fucking HUD, changes immediately. Don't like your UI, changes immediately. Have you thought about this? Someone's there in the replies, yes, we hear you and we are listening. It's like fucking hell. And because of that, people forget this is the company that has gone out of their way to try and solely monopolize CSGO so it only serves them, and they are the lords and masters of it. They've been doing it for years. I've shut down, 2 or 3 of the fucking attempts to do it, right? You know, but people just don't like. We don't even have the same fan base. That's the problem. We cycle through fans. Like people come and go, they come back. You have new naive kids. Like,
just the vibe of a new 15-year-old getting wrecked every 3 years, just getting tricked over and over again, doesn't it? Like they never seem to learn, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's just absolutely ridiculous. So I'm just so tired of it. And I know this story ends. It wouldn't even surprise me if there were people in Sweden trying to dismantle this, because think about it, MTG, the parent company for ESL, is it's a Swedish company. You know,
literally Stockholm based.
Yeah, like, and also, didn't I hear something about?
So in some ways, think about it, fans. That means if PGL comes into Sweden and does a major in fucking Stockholm, in one of the most iconic venues, they essentially cock the people who own fucking ESL. Like, straight up. Like, if I was, by the way, the people on the board of that company, I'd be like, wait a minute, why don't we have events in Stockholm? Why are ours in Poland? That would be my first question.
Wasn't there something behind? Fuck, somebody told me something. I can't even remember. I just don't pay attention anymore. I'm just so disinterested. Well, that basically, they might not be able to do something in Malta, ESL.
Oh, I believe it was that ESL Pro League, the next season is online, right? And it was going to be, I think, that the players were going to fly to Malta, because this was actually the original plan before we were online, is that like they would have had like group stages, I think, of Pro League and other tournaments maybe, would be held in Malta in like a facility that I think they've just like set up now or whatever. And then they were going to have the talent would be in Katowice in a studio or something like that. And then basically, obviously, like, I believe it's that they couldn't get it set up. Like, I think technically you can go to Malta, because I saw like Sponge went back there or whatever. But I think for some reason they couldn't make this work, and that's why they made Pro League Online. So something like that, yeah. Basically, I behind the scenes, I'll give you another gem. Here's what's rich. This is rich as fuck, Richard. So MTG, the company behind ESL, is based in Stockholm. I heard that MTG, because through ESL, they're going to be running one of the RMRs, I'm assuming the EU one, just based on all the aspects. They themselves wanted to run it, I think, in Malta, and they're going to run it in Romania.
So
think about it. This is how rich this is. If in any way ESL is connected with this, they're literally with one hand doing what they're using the left hand to say, don't let fucking Punch get away with that. Give me it. What is this? It's one guy with his hand up both. This is mental. But as usual, fans never get any. All you need is one layer of abstraction, and every fan just gets lost immediately. Yeah, basically it was something like that. Like they're just going to run it in Romania themselves.
So, but why? It begs the question: why not take it to Sweden, guys? I mean,
because by that logic, just go straight into Stockholm. It's the spot, right? Here's another thing fans haven't thought about, right? The first story, Richard, wasn't even the culture minister. It was the mayor of Stockholm says he's going to. Excuse me, I am not a child in an 80s movie. You have zero jurisdiction, Mayor of Stockholm, over immigration directly to your country and getting visas. If you had any pull, by the way, you don't need that news story. You just go and do it, don't you? And then the news story is Mayor of Stockholm saves Swedish major. No, what you do instead is all you can do is pretend the illusion of power and claim, I'm going to look into that. That means fuck all, mate. That doesn't help me. I'm not going to run a tournament just because you said you'd look at it. Then, after that, Richard, then it was this woman, I think it was the finance and culture minister or whatever. Same scenario. What does she have to do with getting visas? Again, either she can literally go to people in the motherfucking cabinet that she works with who can do it, or she's another person producing news stories. By the way, if people haven't figured it out yet, politicians producing news stories which give themselves credit credit for something they've never yet done is essentially their main fucking job. The stuff they sometimes do on the side is what they just have to do to keep the lights on. Like, politicians are just masters of optics now. And that's what I thought stunk the most about this story, Richard, is that behind the scenes, there was never any guarantees in any of this shit. But then you just kept having these stories that to a very naive fan sounded like, oh, it's this close to them fixing it. And it's like, they haven't even taken step one. Like, what are you talking about? It's just news stories. It's just PR at the moment.
Yeah, and totally, and also it's a very desirable headline to grab for yourself because it's going to a demographic of future voters.
Yes.
So, all this political posturing, it's all bullshit.
That's something we should probably mention, isn't it, Richard? That's the other angle as well. When they first announced that, like, there might be problems, they might have to move it, etc., because everyone saw what happened with TI, and we were all kind of treating that as the canary in the coal mine. You probably saw this. Loads of really famous Swedish players and orgs were all just like, wow, I'm so ashamed of Sweden. Like, I thought we were like a more progressive culture. I thought we were advanced in this. That's what worries me, Richard. I get the feeling the mayor and all that stuff is more towards that. It's more towards the idea of like, look, we're not going to let you in the fucking country do the tournament, but fuck, people think it's us. And even worse, now the young Swedes are going to think we're all out of touch and our parties are all that. Because that could be a deal breaker for a young person who doesn't vote on any other issue, right? Of course.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is what I know, right? The idea that PGL would sort of use the unfortunate COVID situation to kind of like save some money is a ridiculous intimation.
Pretty sinister, isn't it?
Yeah, but then on top of that, the idea that Valve for another signature event would allow them to just do it if they got wind that was going on. There's absolutely no way. There's absolutely no way. So this is all bullshit, and this is about bringing down a TO that is in a really difficult and unenviable position. Because I'll tell you this. I know for a fact that when Rio got pushed back, ESL breathed a massive fucking sigh of relief. Of course they did. Nobody wants to do the first major back after all this hiatus, let alone do one in a country that was struggling with all of the COVID protocols, all of the safety procedures you were going to have to put into place, everything. It was about to be a logistical nightmare, and it got took away from them. And now it's all eyes on PGL. And of course, people are going to stoke the flames behind the scenes because there's nothing we love more. If we're in we tell people in esports that the industry's huge, $1 billion industry, Newzoo report, look at all these people, look at Amazon buying Twitch, all the same tired stories and the same tired numbers. Nobody has any confidence in it. Nobody thinks it's anything more than a bubble that's long overdue a pop. Nobody. Because when it comes down to it, if you say, hey, there's plenty of room, isn't there? No. Everybody wants their competitors to fail, which is crazy because behind closed doors, they all say the same thing. We just want to grow the pie for everybody and then we can all share in it and partake of the good. You don't give a fuck. You want the pie for yourself because you think it's a fucking pork pie. You don't think it's a giant, delicious turducken served up at fucking Henry VIII's Christmas ball. You think it's this big. And so you will fucking happily see everybody go first and fuck up and be destroyed. And I think there's absolutely some shit at play behind the scenes here where people, let's say other tournament organizers and other MGO owners, they're willing PGL to fail because if the failure is bad, could prove costly. Could mean that after that, they never get another big event again. Maybe they are effectively eliminated from the CSGO space. So all I'm going to say is all the reporting around this is nonsense.
Somewhat fishy, definitely at a minimum, isn't there? There's some whiff coming from it that just something's not right about it. I can tell you that. As I said, like the way I just nailed the framing there, like, did anyone not notice that it's completely inverted? Like they implied as though like these were all relevant parties and it was just that PGL. They almost made PGL an afterrun. And then of course PGL didn't just sign off on what nip and then these totes real but totally secret people that are high up that say that's not. Give me a fucking break. This may as well be a note being passed around in school. What the fuck are you talking about? You're not, remember, as I pointed out, the person writing the story isn't even credible. Never mind the imaginary people they're they're making up to totally justify the bullshit they're saying. Like, it's mental.
Oh,
Like,
he's got government sources, of course.
and by the way, I'm just going to say this right now. I thought it was funny before, but these nip motherfuckers have me on about my last nerve, mate. Like, if they want to become the new Astralis, they can get the Astralis treatment because I'm fucking sick of it. It'd be one thing if it is the thing, at least in Astralis, it was that cunt Niom. It's all these fucking clowns in the marketing department who can't shut the fuck up saying stuff that's way outside of their lane on Twitter.
So let's get to the roster moves. Hell froze over. Yeah, hell, it's done. It's frozen. That's that. JW benched in Fnatic.
Now, what's good about that statement there, Richard, is a fan could have woken up from a coma without checking the year, and no matter what year it is, that would still be a totally applicable line that could have been said at any point for the last 5 years. Yeah, no,
it's absolutely. It's absolutely insane. I mean,
it's the ultimate by the numbers headline, you know.
Yo, dude, JW's run in Fnatic is fucking insane.
If I'd have laid you odds in like 2015, right, which one of them's still here? JW's got to have the worst odds of it. Him and Pronax had to be like number one. Like, there's no way they're here in 2021, sure.
Yeah. But yep, absolutely they are, and well, not anymore. And so this is a strange one. They basically said, "Yep, we benched JW. We already knew that Golden had been benched, and now they're saying, well, we're going to go international." That was what was floated first of all, and of course, Danish leaks were like, "Yeah, it's Marcel's coming." And then now.
It's a lot of bird nonsense, by the way. That was never even something that was in talks.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't see why it would be based on things MSL himself has publicly said, but you never know with players. Like, fair enough. Maybe he comes in as a coach. Maybe there's some sort of like Pyrrhic victory there. But I mean, the story that is being touted is that it's going to be Alex and Mezzi, obviously both of them formerly from Cloud9. Fnatic leaning into their UK org roots. So, I mean, first of all, I'll just say JW's been on borrowed time for so long. And obviously I like the guy, but I can't remember the last time he looked anything like. It's like when they did that CZ nerf. I just don't think he ever got his powers back. Like, really, he hasn't been the same player since 2014, if we're being honest. But he did have some bright spots in like 2015, 2016, sure. But then after 2016, it's terrible. I mean, like, it's
a lot about hard yards for that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's 26 now. It's not like he's old, but he's decided that, listen, I'm probably going to take up Valorant because that is the CSGO retirement home, and actually probably a good thing for him.
Good in that game, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you make of him finally being cut, and maybe some thoughts about the prospective two fellas coming in?
As I joked about before, but it is accurate. Like, it's not like anyone can complain about this move. He was given more than enough time. He's even been through a bunch of times when they've had the downs, and he's been able to stay. And by the way, I know, again, there's this whole Twitter thing where Flusher was never cut for, whatever you need to believe, mate. Whatever you need to tell yourself. Everyone, basically, in Fnatic, either left if there was someone like Olaf Meister or was removed, except JW, basically. So I understand why. It's because in some ways, of all the people in Fnatic, he actually had a pretty sort of level head out of a lot of the players and could sort of acknowledge when there was flaws with the team and when you needed to change things in the lineup and all the rest. So those people, like the NBKs of the world, tend to be able to stay around a bit longer because essentially, in a world of mega anti-social nerds, you have some level of social conditioning where you understand how to deal with people, how to maneuver social situations, how to be on the right side of a cut, etc. So I think he did an unbelievable job extending his career this long with Fnatic. As I said when he basically announced this move, I can't even deny it. Like, you have to say this, right? I always, in my mind, right, the two names that are Fnatic to me, one, you'll just think I'm a boomer, it's Forest, because he was in the team for 5 years. And that was where he made his whole name. So to me, it was always Forest Fnatic. It wasn't until years later he became NIP Forest. And the other name's obviously Khan, the guy who still works there as a chief gaming officer now. To me, those are the names I see, like on the Mount Rushmore, if I think of Fnatic. Well, JW has to be up there. Like if we were making one tomorrow, the 4 names is probably fucking Forest, Khan, JW, and fucking Reckless at this point in time, right? If you look at the history of the org, like these are the people who just were there super long, mega iconic, all those championships.
He played in the 2 great Fnatic iterations in CSGO.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and years and years and years apart. Part of one of the greatest teams of all time. Brought many majors to the team. Oh, put it this way, he's one of those people where people will always think it's a diss if you say this, but he's one of the great overachievers. Like, I actually think if you run his career back and you just throw him into the mix of different teams, there's almost no times he gets a resume like this. This is an unbelievable level of performance and a career in general.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because even though he's playing, has been playing poorly, I think about like how he gets replaced if it is Alex and Mezzi that come in. And I guess that's a continuation of Alex. I mean, well, unless of course they're gonna go with Chiquinho or Pin. I mean, I don't really get it. Like, I'm glad Alex and Mezzi are gonna get a shot.
I think it's great.
Yeah, but I'm kind of a little bit confused about the team, honestly. I don't really know.
The weird thing to me is just the fact that you are going international and, like, in general, Swedes. It's not even just language. This is another factor people will never get. It's also cultural. Like, Swedes in general, you see they're mega chill, right? Dude, the worst thing you could ever do to a Swedish team, I'm not joking, whether they like English or not, would be put, like, Stewie 2K in their team. Like, they would hate that. They would fucking hate someone shouting and wanting to high five all the time and woo! Like they'd be like, oh, fucking hell, just calm down. We're just fucking playing the game. So I have to say, actually, I don't think this is a terrible set of pickups. Like, I will say, even in terms of when I think of like Golden's calling style, I don't think Alex is that different. It seems like a semi-loose, like you do a little bit of strats, but like you're letting the boys kind of play out how they want to play it out and you trust them to. So I think people like Crims will probably fuck with his style. It's definitely going to be unusual though, putting like 2 UK players in his Swedish team. That's a mix you don't really expect to make. With that said, Messi also seemed like a pretty cool customer as far as I could tell. Didn't seem like a big ego. Seems like he knows what his fucking job is. I would guess the fact they're going in sort of a package implies Alex liked what he got from him in Cloud9 and they probably were on the same page.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what was going on there was, again, they were one of those teams that was like, very, they didn't like all of that. They weren't the, it's why the Kassad thing was a mismatch, because they weren't the shout and scream and let's get kind of all hyped up. It was more kind of methodical, like, yeah, you've done a great job there. Okay, now here's what we're going to do this round. And they wanted a more kind of somber environment. Right. I've known lots of players like that. I mean, NIP were like that. Forest and Get Right are like that. They famously don't want someone jumping up and down and screaming. Funnily enough, RPK was like that.
People don't know that isn't just a meme. That really is the reason they basically kicked Makaleli, by the way. They just didn't like. He was just too much of like a bubbly character. Yeah.
It's it was why RPK and Kenny S couldn't get on back at the start when Kenny S was a kid. So there's some people want it. It's really weird. Some people don't mind it being like eclectic off the server.
Yes,
but when they're playing, they want it to be as serene as possible. Other people want hype and then they want it to be chill, off the server. And you will find like there's lineups that just simply cannot gel together because of these like fundamental clashes. Now, on that basis, I'll say in terms of style, I think it's good for Alex. And I think Alex is going to relish working with these players. We all know Crims is a pretty quiet guy. I can definitely see it working in terms of having meshable personalities. I'm a little bit confused about some of the roles, and I don't know. I mean, like you said, Chiquinho walked in. I'm still kind of like jury's out. And Alex was, if you remember, when they got rid of Woxic,
when he was doing it.
Yeah, when they got rid of Woxic in Cloud9, Alex said, "I'll pick up the AWP," and then they made Essetag the AWPer after that. We're going to talk about Essetag in a moment. So I don't know. They're probably going to stick with Chiquinho in that sense. And then, it's going to take a lot to turn this.
It's not a straight fire lineup yet, is it? Like, it's still at least a piece or two away. Come on.
Yeah, it's gonna take a lot to turn this round. I think I think like expectations should be reasonably tempered. But I guess it's good that Fnatic were just sort of content to go down with the ship. And what's interesting is I know for a fact with the Alex move, this is probably it's a sizable financial commitment in the current landscape.
Oh, when I saw this move, my assumption, by the way, is the real player we're building around is Alex. Yeah, this is the team for the next few years. He's going to be here. Remember, he's still pretty young in his career. He could be here for 5 years, of course.
Yeah. So I think fair enough. Like Fnatic had to do something. It's crazy when you see them like outside of the top 30. I think they were like fucking 40 something in the world.
How bad does this make Swedish Counterstrike look? Forget the whole shit with the major, which just is an unfortunate timing. NIP has had to shell out loads of that money that hadn't quite yet come from the Chinese overlords to buy a Danish player. And now the main Swedish team that's had all the success in CSGO, they're basically getting rid of people and bringing in UK players. You write the jokes, boys. I didn't make this up. Sweden's supposed to be the greatest Counter-Strike nation ever. It's an area where, at least until about 5 years ago, you could trip over and find 3 people who'll be a top 10 player in the world, like in 3 years from that. Like you could go to those semi-pro Swedish lands and you would see people, no joke, where you don't know them yet, but in 2 years that guy's going to be in Fnatic and this guy's going to be in NIP and this guy might even be the best player ever to play. You just don't know it. He's just sat there as like a 15-year-old kid. That doesn't exist in Sweden anymore. It's sad, but it just doesn't. I mean, just look at NIP. They're still dicking around with that 5th spot. Man alive, like Sweden is in such a bad spot in Counter-Strike right now, and band-aiding it with a bunch of foreign players ain't going to fix the problem, by the way. You're going to have to address it at some point in time.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it's really weird. I hope Fnatic do turn it around. We need all of the good brands with the big fan bases to be coming out swinging as we go into the major and making it a memorable event. So I'm just gonna wish them all the best and hope that it works. Also, I am just gonna say, for whatever reason, they are thinking of a more UK direction, or they don't think they've got a first choice AWPer. Because I did see people in the chat going, yeah, but KDO is an AWPer. He wasn't an AWPer when he first came into the team. They gave him that duty. Obviously, JW was still the designated AWPer when they picked him up. But I mean, listen, I'll keep saying it. Someone's got to go get Smoothie. Someone has to free him. He's too good to be playing for Movistar Riders, and I want to see Smoothie on a decent team before it's too late for him to play in a major. He should be gifted a major for the one that he walked away from, so it all balances out basically. And I think maybe I put it this way: I think no joke, not just saying it. I think Smoothie is like a way better AWPer than some of the AWPers that are in some of these top tier teams right now.
For Fnatic at the moment, put it that way, that goes without saying. That shouldn't even be a question. He's probably better than Fnatic is right now. He might even be overqualified.
Yeah, I was going to say he might not want to join. Anyway, just while we're doing classic by the numbers headlines, we'll just skirt over this one. I saw the headline come up on HLTV. Fox to take break from competition. Like, man alive. You've been taking a break from competition for the past 4 years, haven't you? Like, where the fuck? What are you still doing?
Is that out of a time capsule from 2016 and so? What the fuck is that?
I know, literally, playing for the Portuguese team Offset. The worst part is that we never talked about it at the time, but he got embroiled in like some fucking insane controversy and had to apologize.
Yeah, wasn't it implied that it was something like domestic violence or something crazy, wasn't it? Why am I wrong on
that one? Let me get.
I think it was something pretty extreme. Whatever the story was, it wasn't just some joke thing. I remember.
Yeah, here it is. I'll just.
Was it the one where he said something like? I think he said something in Portuguese that was like an idiom. That was something like, if a woman did that, though, you'd beat her or something. Something like this.
It was. It's not an idiom. It was just bad. So basically, he was playing a game. This was in fucking. I don't even know what year it was.
2 years ago, though, right?
Yeah, might have been just last year. I mean, times.
Oh, it says 2020. Yeah, on that story. Yeah.
So, but basically, he got suspended at the start of 2020 because one of his they were playing, and one of the girlfriends of the team he was playing against was shouting in the crowd, just doing what you do. And he said something like, if that was my girlfriend, I'd slap her, basically. So, that was the last time I saw Fox in the headlines, and he had to sort of do an apology, and he was temporarily dropped, and then he came back. It's just like, fuck's sake, you can't even believe how some people operate. But to make an announcement that you're playing Portuguese CSGO almost exclusively, and you're saying, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna take a break from competing, mate. If you're 34 years old playing exclusively Iberian CSGO, yeah, you're already on a fucking break, mate. I'll tell you
Some
that.
would say it wasn't your choice to take said break.
Yeah,
Some would
exactly.
say life slapped you twice. Maybe you should sit the fuck down and shut up.
Mm. So that was that. Then we moved to the big story. We were saying just on the last episode, weren't we? We said, listen, I think Complexity might be making a roster change. You know, there's rumblings afoot. I just hope it isn't Rush, because if you make that decision, you're doing it purely based on statistics and not what's good for the team. Because while
So
Rush,
I'm just going to say this: JKS can't keep getting away with this, mate. What is he doing? Is he some sort of shadowy puppet master?
there was zero. It can't.
He
It
doing
can't
this?
be
I know.
JKS.
Nobody.
It never could be JKS because of the size of his contract. It never could.
Because no one would buy it. I get what you mean. Yeah.
Well, no one would buy it, and even if you're paying half of it to not
it's a
play
waste
it,
of money. Yeah.
How do you justify that expense to anyone? It was the same problem that they had in Cloud9. Like once you had that team, you were in on that team. That team had to work, because you can't drop someone who's on fucking 40 grand a month and then go, it says in my contract I get half. That would still make him one of the highest paid players in the fucking scene. To sit on your bench, you couldn't do it. So, you know, the situation they had here was like JKS can't go. I mean, personally, again, I was taught fantasy football and sort of stuff. So yeah, you make that hard cut, right? But no, it was always it was going to be Rush. I guess if they were going to cut anyone, maybe you could have cut Poison, but go try and get an AWPer. But nah, it had to be
short supply at the moment. AWPers, let's be real. Every story's risky. What AWPers everyone getting?
Yeah. Now, I will say there was some good original content on Reddit, and it was why Rush deserved more credit. So I'll always shout out, right? Because obviously on the show, we call out all the fucking moron Redditors and we call out all the lunatics. I'll shout out good content when I see good content. OC, as the kids call it. You have to put OC in brackets so people know it's original content. But this guy called Vision Snaps, he went and did like a breakdown. He took all of the stats from HLTV, and it basically showed what, if you'd ever watched Complexity, like with an eye for detail, you would have already known. And that was that, you know, he was the unsung flasher, which, by the way, that's a terrible title. Don't give him that, because that has a very different connotation in Britain. But, you know, he was doing lots of support work. That was our point that we made last time. Now, Complexity came out and said, we're dropping Rush. And then someone with a check mark whose name escapes me, or maybe I'm sparing their blushes, went, holy shit, Danish Leaks might have something up, because they thought Magisk was going to join. And then 5 minutes later, Complexity came out and went, yeah, it's Esatag, guys. It's Esatag. So this move for me is, first of all, listen, I know the stats will never show it and history won't remember, but I'm going to just say it on the record. Rush got done dirty. Rush was an integral part of that when Complexity were good and they came into that top 5 team. And I still think he was doing his role. And I agree with you. The letdown for me isn't Rush. The letdown for me has always been like, you've gone and got a star player, JKS, who don't play like a star player.
Oh, this story makes me sick, mate. This is exactly every story I hate in the esports industry. Because if people don't know, like in this particular case, I'm thinking it's more the org based on it. And if I had to guess the way the org works, I'd imagine Jason Lake probably does it like my old boss at SK. He probably has his guy. I'm guessing probably Blame F in this case. He probably goes with him and Blame F. They figure it out between the two of them who we're going to remove, who we're going to add. And unfortunately, you're all going to hate this because everyone who watches these shows still believes that, like, I can never gain knowledge about the game, but they play the game and watch the matches and they're all experts about Counterstrike. Believe it or not, even your favourite players have a very poor sense of how teams operate. Like your favourite player, no matter who it is, almost certainly would cut like tackle from the original SK if they had the choice and replace them with like whoever you want, Phelps. You know, they would make that move every day of the week because their brain goes like this. You've heard it in interviews. Get ready for some cursed fucking terminology. They would go, well, the thing about being a top player is a top player can play all roles he needs to and can adapt. So if you put the top players, they would just figure out how to play the game. It doesn't matter that as an analyst, I would go, but that's not the way the game works. Like in the modeling system we use, they have different responses. But no, but a top player could figure it all out. So the problem is this, right? If I look at complexity, it's as you said, Richard, the people who were definitely doing their job go in this order. I would go blame F number 1, config number 2, rush number 3. Everyone who isn't those 3 people, I have issues with how you play, what you do in your role, and whether you're actually worth the money you get paid in complexity right now. But you'll notice the 2 people I didn't mention, they just skated by completely somehow. Apparently it's totally fine for JKS to get paid a king's fucking ransom to be a below average player for the roles that he is getting, definitely not shit roles. Then you have Poison, probably the most overrated AWP in all of Europe right now, because I don't even hear people rallying like, you must cut this guy. He just seems to skate. And I know why, because if you watch it with the eye test, he has the ultimate style of AWPing for fuck boys to think is good. Because he goes so aggro on those peaks that when he hits, you go, he's really talented, got a lot of potential. Ignoring, by the way, that he's playing the game where the gun that he uses is not allowed to die a lot, has to actually be mega efficient with kills versus deaths, has to save appropriately in the current meta, and entire saves are based around picking that gun up and not taking fights. So, in my opinion, like, the idea of those 2 people, I get the JKS one, as you said, just contract reasons, but the idea, like, Poison gets a skate just because he's the AWPer. You're not a very good AWPer, mate, but now Rush has to lose his job. A guy, as far as I can tell, was the guy doing all the bitch work in the team, was helping make config look as good as he was, probably doing all the things Blame F needs to round that system out. Like, mate, this move, I hate this move. Like, I know everyone's going to go like, oh, but S-Attack's go to X, Y, and Z. We have no idea how good X is going to be in this team, mate.
Here's the issue. Like, I just don't understand, like, what S-Tag is. Now, here's on the one hand, right? This is one of these, like, hugely conflicting things. On the one hand, he is someone who will take any role to make it work for a team. He did it in Astralis. He went to Cloud9. He changed role twice in Cloud9. And he went from, like, fucking entry, right, that he wanted to work at Cloud9. By the way, people who put their hands up and say, I will be the entry fragger, are such a rare breed because it is the maddest world. Forget being a fucking AWPer, by the way. Everyone laments it like, oh, it's hard being an AWPer because, you know, if your team die, you have to save and you don't get the kills and your stats are bad. Oh, woe is me. And if you have a bad game, people really feel it. Fuck you, AWPers. Shut the fuck up and look over at the absolute 2 unsung heroes. The guys like Rush who stand there with a fucking flashbang out and get domed by someone who just does a fucking Ferrari peek round a fucking corner and they were trying to set you up or a star player up to get a kill. Or, of course, you know, the entry fragger, who, by the way, the entry fragger is, right, we're going to flash, you go, yep, you get that kill, mate. Oh, you didn't, did you? Okay, don't worry, we'll get him next time, champ. You know, and people will scrutinize you and pick you apart. It's quite telling, by the way, and I've talked about this a lot, and it came up again on the on Reddit recently. Somebody was talking about how Scream it was on your video, I think, when you did about MBK and his unbelievable longevity, and somebody said Scream was a better player than MBK. Look at all his stats, and if you remember, Scream played as an entry fragger. Delusional nonsense spouted by someone who wasn't there. Au contraire, Scream refused to be an entry fragger. Your little headshot machine, who apparently had crisp 1-bullet aim and couldn't miss. That was his entire game, by the way. He couldn't be asked to learn to spray. He refused to play entry fragger. What does that tell you? It is the nightmare fucking role. Nobody wants to do it. So I'll say this about S-Attack. Balls of fucking steel, that one. What? Sure. walked away, jeopardized that big money FPX move, right? To go to Astralis to be a sixth player. Maybe he was confidently getting the team. Maybe he was a check stealer. I'm starting to believe it was the former rather than the latter. Then when he played out over there, and sure, it was only like fucking 26 online maps or whatever it was, right? He was still probably the best or second best player in the online era at that time for that Astralis team. And his role was kind of nebulous. He would move around. He was very versatile. When he came to Cloud9, he said, right, I want to be the anti-fragger. Madness. Then as soon as that couldn't work and Woxic went, he went, all right, I'll be the AWPer. And so they were training him up to be an AWPer and all their tactics that revolve around him. This guy is game as fuck to make anything work. But here's the problem. He's not going to do what Rush did, is he? He won't. There's no way. There's no way. And the problem is, as he wants a little bit more of himself, what you already had the star players. You got JKS, you got Config, you got Blame F. That should be enough. That should work. What you needed was, as I said, somebody that could come in and be a Rush and be the glue and be the support, be the primer, let's call them. I don't know if S-Tag's going to do that. If he does do it and does it as well as Rush, holy shit, this guy's the most versatile player in world Counterstrike, bar none. But I just don't think it's going to happen. And I think it's a move where Complexity have suddenly got a better team on paper, but paper don't mean shit half the time.
Yes. I agree with you as well. The real problem in this team was you've just kicked out a defender because the strikers don't score enough.
Yeah.
Go and fucking plug the right hole. That doesn't even make sense, does it?
Yeah, totally. So we'll wait and see. But I mean, again, wish them all the best for all the same reasons I just said about Complexity. I mean, can you imagine as well if it had been Magisk? I mean, that wouldn't have worked. That's even worse. I'll say that. Like, as sensational and salacious a move it was, Magisk for Rush, it would have been a bigger disaster than S-Tag for Rush. Because I do believe S-Tag can be repurposed to do whatever you want. Right, then, just keeping one eye on the clock, because I know you got a hard out. Complexity also brought in a coach. And it's time, boys. Peacemaker Productions. He's back. He's done it again. And I'll tell you what, I know we've like done memes and done fucking jokes about him in the past. Obviously, with a podcast that's been around as long as this one, there's highs, there's lows, there's ups, there's downs. But right now, me and Peacemaker, and I think you and Peacemaker, we're all cool. And also,
he's also matured a lot as a person, I will say. Like he'll totally tell you, like, yeah, obviously I was pissed off about stuff back in the day, but like put it this way, he gets it now. Like he understands we're like agents for good, essentially.
Yeah, but not only that. Here's what here's why I tell you where he went up massively in my estimations. Because in the build up to the coaching scandal, Peacemaker was one of the people who came out and was calling people out, said it was bullshit, wouldn't have any of it, right? Him and Zeus, if you remember. Now, by the way, keep in mind there were other coaches that did this that were then subsequently found guilty of doing it, right? And in fucking, who was it? Was it Starix's case? He turned around and went, I don't even remember being a cheating piece of shit.
Yep.
Brilliant. Well, that's all right then. But Peacemaker, not caught doing anything. Neither was Zeus. And so obviously these guys are straight legit. The option was there. You had the excuse. Everyone was doing it, right? And yet these guys stood tall. And so mad respect to Peacemaker for that. Like, you went up my estimation. I thought, maybe if ever there was a guy who was going to take a little bit of an edge, like, especially if everyone else was doing it, it'll be this guy. I was completely wrong, completely misjudged it. And so mad respect to him. And also, the more and more I've started looking at how teams operate and the way that coaches get treated, let's just say this. If you are a strong personality coach in this business, the players will fucking mutiny and fuck you over every time.
It's just a case of when, not if. Put it that way. When, not if.
Yeah, it's always going to happen to you. And basically, like, the only way you get away with that, by the way, is, well, you can be two types of coach. You can be a glorified water boy, or you can be an ex-player that they like. That seems to be it, as far as I can tell. If you're a strong personality who comes in and say, I want to have authority over who plays where. I want to have authority over sometimes even the roster moves. I want to have authority over the training schedule. I want the in-game leader to listen to my calls. Suddenly, this just chips away at players. And so, looking back, I think Peacemaker's probably been, because obviously that was the joke, that wherever he went, conflict would follow. He was the most misnomered coach in all of Counterstrike. But I think, honestly, looking back, I think he treats it the way the role should be.
He's like a proper sports coach, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What he gets is actually what. Here's the thing: with the amount of stories, like you say, obviously there's some like grain of truth there. Obviously, he is getting kicked in part because there are disagreements about, like, maybe the IGL doesn't agree, or maybe they don't like the players he wants to work with, blah blah blah. But the problem I agree with is like this: I think the way he does it is actually the way it should be done. Like, I've always said this, if I ever was going to be a coach, by the way, I'm not taking any project with this. I don't have complete control. Because at the end, I get judged based on what happened, the results of the team, whether or not it was me or not. So I want to actually know that I implemented what I wanted to do. And if it fails, I can go to sleep safe at night and go, right, I'll give it my best shot. The last thing I want is what most coaches have had, which is you get sort of like 20% say and then 100% of the blame. Fuck that noise. I'm not taking people telling me I failed in this way when it was some bonehead player who short-circuited the strat or won't play a role, or the IGL just tells me I'm just not going to listen to you like that. No, in that scenario, I do a Kassad, mate. I just step down, right? That's it. I'm out. I'm not having my name on a project that I'm not involved in. I'll also say this as well. In line with what you're saying, because he actually has done it essentially like a professional, but in the modern day, even CSGO players want their dick sucked. They want you to just kowtow to them, do what they say. Right? I think he's been done dirty a few times, mate. I can't be every time because there's too many teams, but I've heard of a couple where it was just like, I think they just did the classic thing I always say. You fire the coach first so you don't have to fire each other. It's a prisoner's dilemma. You all get together and go, look, we're fucking shit right now, so it's going to go bad. Let's at least replace the coach. There's 3 more months in it. It's a cynical move, but people do it, in my opinion.
And also, I'll say this, like, Jason Lake will have done his homework, and I also think Jason Lake, he's always been a very gracious GM in the powers and authorities that he does give over to his staff and his coaches. And look, no disrespect to Cater, we'll never know the ins and outs of that. Sure. But there's no doubt in my mind that Peacemaker's a much more forcible personality, knowing them both. Sure. And maybe that's what complexity need. I mean, it looks to me that, and you'll see this cyclically with Jason Lake and his teams. You can have the carrot, but that's on the proviso. The stick is round the fucking corner. And I think he's been more than generous with the carrot times in this team. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think actually Peacemaker represents an avatar of somebody that's probably going to be a bit more in line with what Blame F wants to do.
There was the way as coach Desertag and Blame F when they were in Heroic a couple of years ago. So I'm guessing there was probably even again, like, he's probably the guy Blame F asked for, if I had to guess,
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it was kind of interesting because I think he made like a funny little like tweet or a comment, which I don't have to hand, but he said something like, "Can't wait to not call ecos" or something. I don't know. It was like, and people picked up on it and were picking the comment apart on social media. But I think I agree with you. I think if anything, I think Blame F's a little bit tired by all the passivity that's been, coming on. It's one thing to have someone who's a coach, but then if you're the IGL and you're doing all the heavy lifting, it's nice that here's some, analysis or whatever, and here's some demos and here's some prep work. We'll never know how much input Cater had, but if I was a guessing guy, I would say Blame F's probably feeling a little bit burned out and a little bit, exasperated by it all. So can't hurt to have Peacemaker come in and give some new ideas, and maybe you can have a better collaboration than what you've had with your previous coach. Who knows? But yeah, big overall at complexity. Let's see how they do. Now, of course, the other one, the one that Danish Leaks got right, was Lucky joining the roster from Tricked. This is the AWPer that they've brought in. And of course, this means currently Astralis are back to having a 6-man roster. So because this
even had
news.
to slip it in. They even had to, like a bunch of cunts, have Casper did come on stage like Bart Simpson that episode. Like, say the thing, Casper.
Yeah.
It's a 6-man rotates. Like, I can't do it with you anymore, mate. It's too many years. Give me a break.
And this came obviously hot on the heels of the story that we kind of set it up. It was one of these fucked up likelihoods that it was probably a 90-10 split, but that 10 was like, if you had to place a bet on the big underdog bet, it was probably a good one to make. And that is that Glaive has agreed that he signed another long contract with Astralis and committed his future to the organization. Now, we'll start by talking about the Glaive aspect of this, and I'll explain what I mean when I say, while it wasn't 100% likely, it was something that was always going to be a consideration. When we were breaking down of Astralis, we were talking about how, look, it's the terrible time to be out there in free agency right now if you're a player, especially a player, by the way, that has huge salary demands and expectations. Let's be clear, Glaive's the greatest IGL of all time in CSGO. He is somebody that was about to go into free agency. There are a handful of teams that could probably match the salaries on now or increase it. And those that did, they're going to want instant results for that money. And we all know that instant results, that's the pipe dream. So Glaive was in a situation where he was faced, and also keep in mind, fatherhood's round the corner. He was faced with a situation that basically he could join a G2, and let's be real, who else is there that could maybe match him financially? G2. It's not going to be FaZe. They're in with Carrigan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's basically like three or four teams total in the world.
Yeah. So I mean, and most of them are spoken for.
Yep.
So he was relying on one of those ponying up with a big contract and then going there and then him getting the results so he doesn't get cut in 3 to 6 months or the team fucking implodes. Also, I heard from behind the scenes that the contract comes with money, but not just money, also the understanding that he will have a big chunk of paternity leave when it comes around. And that they're going to actually treat him the way that he should have been treated the first time around. Now, if I was him, I'd take Astralis. Anything they say, it's not even a pinch of salt at this point. They are habitual serial liars. But by all accounts, from the people I talked to, he was able to get the bag and also get security for what he needs to do to be a good parent and have a better quality of life. In that sense, he understood he was the key, that by signing with Astralis, it gives them an opportunity to maybe keep some of the other players, although I'm hearing that at least one of them is pretty much close to leaving at this point. But not
raises the likelihood at least one could stay, though, for sure.
Yes, but not just that. Of course, it also Glaive staying enables you to at least sign other players of vague competitive levels. So with that in mind, Lucky's actually been talked about for a while as a player that is only 18. He's really impressed at Tricked. They obviously need an AWPer. Glaive himself said it was a priority for them to bring in an AWPer again by, the very sort of passive conversations I've had around it. Apparently, Glaive actually is really excited by the move and likes Lucky and rates Lucky and wants to work with him. That was also one of the things that were being floated when they were having the negotiations. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think Glaive hasn't maybe thought through all the angles because Zonic's leaving and now Astralis V3 it's going to be at this point is going to be judged solely on him and Hunden and how they work together, but it's going to be Glaive that has the continuity and therefore he's going to get a lot of the criticism. Also, you're going to be bedding in new players. I think, like say, you're going to see one or two still leave. I think Zonic leaving is in and of itself a huge blow. So I don't know what to make of this, but from Astralis's perspective, huge coup to be able to sign Glaive and keep him on the roster, and means that maybe, depending on what else happens with other players, they can limp along for a little bit.
Yeah, the thing to me is this, like, it's more the Astralis side that's the bigger deal. Like, this actually is a massive coup for them. They were on track to, for real, lose every single player, most of them without any buyouts, and just be left carrying an empty bag looking like dickheads. As, by the way, as you'll have even seen, there was even some reports about it, as even more players, some of the ones I alluded to before, say no to them. People who, in like a year ago, none of these names say no. They all instantly say yes. In fact, here's the one thing I'll say if you're Astralis that's been a bit brutal. It's the order of things. If you'd have had Glaive locked down 6 months ago, most of the names I've told you say no, say yes. They say, oh, well, okay, if it's Glaive then, maybe I do join. Maybe this is a team that has future. The problem is, a lot of them, like I alluded to, I told some of them this, you have no idea if any of the players are there, mate. So you think you're joining Astralis, you might actually just be joining North with Astralis painted over the top, as it were. Like, you don't know what fucking teammates you're going to have. So to me, it's more the Astralis side that, like, this is all, everything on Astralis' end is great with this move. Like, this is the best possible chance you have, especially if you're losing Zonic, to have any hope of having a future team. And if you had Hunden, probably the best talent scout Denmark's ever had. So those two combined, you've got a chance. I won't say a fighting chance, because that's another area I have, like, maybe a different take than other people. Here's my problem with this move overall, is this. It's like, I just did a whole episode of Thorin's Big Brains, one of my shows I do for my sponsor, where basically me, Pimp, and Dusk go into all these moves, basically. So I won't give the entire thing I say there, but the short version, and I thought a little bit, I've developed a bit, goes like this. These moves in Astralis are more interesting, in my opinion, just for what they say about the psychology of each of the players currently. Like, you look at the team each one of them is linked with and why they would want to join that team and where that team is at, and you really get a sense for where they're all at in their lives, not their careers, their lives. Like, you figure out who wants to play with a former teammate. Maybe that's a Dupree move. You figure out, does Magus want a totally different career? You figure out, Zonic, maybe he wants to start a new project with people who respect it. That you can see the fact Device obviously wanted to be in Sweden and be with his girlfriend or whatever. So when I look at the Glaive move, I don't think there's any way, Richard, I can consider this as a competitive move. I don't believe it was made on any level as a competitive move. I believe, as you just said, it was a lot of side factors. Like, at this point in my life, I've won everything, so I want to have a situation where I don't want to have to move organization. I want to stay put where I am. I want a better conditions than I've currently had. I want more money than I've currently had. There's a factor fans wouldn't think about. Astralis, the org, can simultaneously be Scumfox and have given Glaive a better deal. And here's one reason why. If you're Astralis, as Richard sort of vaguely alluded to, you're not just paying for what Glaive does today. Like, if I'm G2, when I buy Glaive, all I get is what you can do for me tomorrow, Richard. I don't get any of the pass. I don't get the majors. But if I'm Astralis, signing Glaive, just what that does to the continuity of the story of Astralis is worth whatever you paid him. Like, the shareholders can say, so we're keeping the captain of the team, though. That's a massive deal right there. If I'm even new players, as you say, there are players who now might join who never would join if Glaive and Javis and Zonic all leave the team. Like, the implied value, actually, of this move means I wouldn't be surprised if, as you say, he did get a really amazing deal. Probably got even more money, even more security, even more consideration, as you say. I wouldn't even be surprised if they threw something in there, like if in 3 years or 2 years you're not even a player anymore, you become a coach and stuff. So, you know, it's one of those things where it's always a clever way to sell someone who feels like they're nearing the end of their career. Because here's what people wouldn't understand is, Glaive was already cool with going into the wilderness in CSGO. I don't necessarily know, like a lot of people will think, is that he's a lifer. I think this might be a guy, I alluded to this before, I was worried he was just going to quit last year, mate. I thought he was one of the names might just say, fuck it, this is too much hassle, I'm out, CS is sort of dying anyway, I'll just leave now. And one problem I have is this, a lot of fans are going to make a really big mistake, in my opinion. They're going to think, right, oh, Carrigan can do it. He's gone to all these different teams and brought new players. And I don't know if Glaive's got the temperament for that. This is something Pimp even made the point about, which is he said this. He said if Glaive is super into the project and really is like intellectually engaged, it'll be amazing. He guarantees he'll make whoever joins good. He'll make them a top 10 team. But he also did make this comment. And by the way, Glaive is a massive fan and friend of Pimp rather, is a massive friend of like Glaive's in that regard. He wouldn't say this as like a diss. He said, but if he's not motivated, then I'm worried. And I agree. Because here's the problem. Glaive might have worked with Esatag and Yogi and a few of these people. I mean, technically, most of those weren't even in the team when he was there. But he hasn't had to go back to level 0. Like, if you hear some of the names swirling around Astralis now, this is like becoming the DIGL of North. Like, do you really want to do that after all the majors you won? Do you want to start? So my problem is this. If I believe he did it for family reasons, I can fuck with that. I wouldn't do it personally. I tend to do things for the pure reason behind them, but I can understand it. The problem I have is this. I don't think this is like the next chapter of an amazing return and he comes with all new players. I think if he loses most of the players, let's say he keeps one, you can pick who. Dupree, Megis, pick the one that you want. If he only keeps one, I think this is sort of like the last stanza. I think he just slowly winds down. He probably still does a pretty good job, but it won't be like the best IGL. He won't be in a top team, won't be winning championships. I don't think Astralis is going to be in a great spot the next couple of years. I think London's going to have to really do some amazing scouting work if they want to get ahead. I think they're going to have like a year or so of lag where there's not much happens in the squad. I think Glaive's going to be the main story.
Yeah, and we get this weird inauspicious start. Like, let's say it is Hunden that joins, which, by the way, is a crazy story in and of itself with the history and the aggro from Nicola Nyholm towards Hunden during the cheating scandal, which, Hunden served his time now. But he put a...
by the way, Nicola Nyholm does not play 5D chess. He doesn't even play chess, mate. He plays fucking Uno or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no one would ever make that. He didn't even need to volunteer that statement. That was what was so stupid about it. All he could do was make us all look silly like he does now.
Yeah, so... Nikolai put this statement out today, I think just before we went live.
You mean, by the way, not Nyholm, obviously, yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, sorry, Hunden, yeah, Nikolai Hunden. He said, what Heroic and I have achieved through the last 15 months has been amazing. Heroic has become an integrated part of the top tier teams in international Counterstrike and has won multiple trophies in 2020 and 2021. Of course, obviously, reigning ESL Pro League champs. I feel incredibly happy about the adventures I have had with Cadian, Stown, Tezes, Borup, Nick Oshush, and Refresh, and everything we have accomplished together, both professionally and privately. In the past few months, I've been in negotiations with Heroic about a contract renewal, but I've come to the realization that I wish to begin a new chapter of my career once my contract with Heroic expires. Heroic and I have been a perfect match, but the recent turn of events is deeply regrettable. Because I care deeply about the players, I've always had a desire and interest in our journey together, having the best possible ending, and in Heroic having all the prerequisites of continuing to do well when I leave. The recent rumors have circulated claiming I have shared Heroic scrapbook. This I can categorically deny. I have the biggest respect for Heroic, and I would never want to harm the team or in any way affect them negatively.
We'll come back to that, but keep reading it. We'll come back to that, don't we?
Yeah. The material I have shared is anti-strap material of our opponents. This material was shared with colleagues from other teams in the context of sparring. Knowledge sharing is essential for me as a coach in respect. Staying in the loop and developing. At no point in time has Heroic's own tactics been shared or discussed. In addition to this, I want to state that I will always cooperate with ESIC and other relevant institutions, as well as provide documentation about anything found necessary to the case. So...
Can we just hit that one, the one about the tactics part first? Because there's an obvious part. Everyone else has missed this, Richard. I've looked everywhere on the internet. No one has my take. Right, Hunden. You saying there's rumours out there that I've been sharing strats. Well, that's not true. Source me, a convicted cheater.
Yeah.
I'm going to need more than that. Guess what? Your credibility's shot, sunshine. You daft cunt. Think it through. That doesn't. Hunden, you haven't thought it through, mate. Like, don't either A, don't mention it. It's already. I didn't even hear this rumor. Or B, have someone else come out. Like, have like a fucking another court. I've never heard of him do that. No one gives a fuck about your opinion on it, mate. You have been recent. I'm not doing this, by the way, to dredge you up. It's just you do it to yourself when you bring up this case.
But yeah, so look, what ended up happening here was basically, they went to Cologne, and Hunden didn't go, right? Well, it's all predicated on this idea, and it's become like this weird little fucked up bugbear where players in the CSPP are all in each other's ears. But what if Moses took all of them strats to Team Liquid and they have an advantage? How did that theory fucking work out for you, by the way? Like, I bet he was thinking, going, I wish I had them strats. I wish I did it. Wish I took them recordings, right? But anyway, this was going on, and that's why they ended up taking the, sports psychologist or life coach or whatever the fuck he is who was behind him, because this rumor's been percolating for a while. And I think the players in Heroic are utterly convinced that for whatever reason, Hunden knew he wasn't going to sign his new contract and has been basically out there like trying to undermine Heroic in some way.
Like some espionage shit almost, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's like, listen, I know enough about the Danish scene, right? Because I know all of these players. I've known them all for years. We've all hung out, right? They are insane. They make the French scene. When it comes to madness and gossip and backbiting and backstabbing, they make the French thing look like fucking amateurs. They're absolutely out of control. So whatever the truth of it, right? That was the prevailing sentiment from certain people within Heroic, that he was sharing strats, he was sharing tactics, and he absolutely has to go. And he was doing it, so he was like trying to chip away at Heroic. So when he went to Astralis, they were no longer the number one Danish team.
I'll give you another example of how people have to be very careful with what precedents they establish, Rich. So it's implied, based on what you're saying, some of the people were players in Heroic. Let's just take stock for a second, guys, of what they're saying. The players in Heroic, the team that Hunden cheated while the coach of, and then people said, including Nicola Nyholm, essentially, wow, I can't believe you, the players, might have cheated against us. Go, no, we didn't cheat at all. By the way, I think that coach is a mad fucking suspect. But he never said anything to you, though, did he, though? No, never said anything to you, though, right? Even though you were inside, thick as thieves, in the same org, he never attempted to cheat using you, right? Think it through. These people, dude, these are like, those shit episodes of police procedurals where they don't get the guy at the end by unraveling some top next level shit. They just do like a double bluff where they say something like, and then we found your fingerprints. And he goes, but that's not possible because I was wearing gloves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and then, even though, by the way, spoiler, that would like be definitely inadmissible, like shit, and they'd say it was entrapment or something, like whatever. But yeah, that's how they end it. Like, oh, they got him. That's like
they are allowed to do that in US.
Although they are now, I know. But
yes, in some states they're actually rolling it back. But yeah, you can lie to a suspect as part of an interrogation technique, provided the lie. There's some stipulation, but it's like provided the lie is within like a certain reason, like is it like too much? You can't like come in and say like, oh, your mom's just died or whatever, you know what I mean, like to try and make them emotionally vulnerable. But you can tell somebody that someone else is like, fingered you for a crime. Like, yeah,
it's the way, that's the level America's on. They're like, listen, we can't be ridiculous, you can't gaslight the whole reality, but you can do everything else. So.
Yeah. So the reason I was looking into this is when I was researching for there was a state that's just made it so they can no longer lie to minors.
Oh, by the way,
in interrogation,
so they were even like lying to kids.
They were even lying to kids.
I'm not joking. If give me half an hour in a search engine, I'll pull up like 30 stories of police in America literally entrapping children and getting them to sell drugs and all sorts of crazy shit. By the way, they did it with worse than that. They did it with mentally disabled people. There's some really dark stories out there.
People forget, right? Let me just bring this up.
By the way, the funniest ones ever, if people have never seen them, is that there are so many of these police doing this that there's stories, the ones I'm on about, where they like entrap each other, where it's like, it turns out it's like a DEA agent, like traps an FBI agent who traps like another guy. And then the joke is they actually all are like the Spider-Man meme, just like. But
I urge anyone, right? Because I know, look, I should make it political, right? Because it's always bad. But remember how like Donald Trump was evil and there's like Nosferatu and Vlad the Impaler and Dracula and fucking everyone all rolled, and Hitler and everyone else all rolled into one. Right. And they were all, everyone who's ever evil in history, Trump was worse, right? Well, I just want to remind everyone that George W. Bush did the ultimate act of entrapment because he wanted to push the war on drugs. He literally had CIA operatives go to a local drug dealer and say, "Come, you sell crack? Come meet us in this park." Right? And they went, "Yeah, I don't even know where that is. Is that the one near the White House?" And he went, "Yeah." And basically they set them up, bought the drugs, arrested him, put him in jail for the full length of the sentence. And then literally George Bush went on TV and went, "Look at these fucking drugs I just bought in a park across from the White House. It can happen to you. It can happen to anyone." He did that. Go look it up. 1989. That was. So absolutely insane. Imagine a president sending out CIA goons to get some fucking like late teens drug dealer so you can have your big TV moment, and then you just threw that kid in jail. Full entrapment. And no, it wasn't Reagan. It was Bush, as you can see by the link that I've used, because I sourced my stuff. So no, not Reagan. It was Bush Senior. So yeah, mate, fucking hell, American entrapment ain't what it used to be in America, you know. Right. Anyway, that's all of the stories. Let's get into the viewer questions because Thorin's got a hard out in 30 minutes. So let's clatter through these. If you are a patron and you pay $50 or more, you get to ask us a question, and we will do our best to answer it. It can be about anything whatsoever. Echo asks, who is your favorite sports player of all time, in any sport, obviously, and why?
Ooh, do you have one? Because I'll have to pick on that one. Let me think. Who would I go between? Because the problem is I've never had to like pick one. Let me think. Who would I pick for that? Because it's like the short list is it's probably between Kobe Bryant in basketball and Roger Federer in tennis. I'm not sure on that one actually. I could go either way. I'll maybe say Federer. Just a massive fan of his game. Like, he's one of those people where, like, put it this way, he can lose the game and I'll still enjoy watching it. It's just so fucking aesthetically brilliant to watch, you know. It's
really hard because it's like you have your cult heroes. You know.
For me, it's very different. Like who I like from who I, you know, who my favorite. You know, like I don't know how I even divide that up. Yeah, who do you go with on this one?
Well, you see, the safe one that I can always go with because it covers all the bases is Maradona.
Oh, classic! Yeah,
greatest footballer to ever play the game. Fuck Pele. Right?
He did literally cheat in that fucking World Cup match, though.
And then, knowing he cheated, then scored one of the greatest World Cup goals of all time, just to show I don't need to cheat to win, but I will cheat to win. Right? And again, mad respect that. If he'd just done the handball, you got a point. He didn't. He absolutely dribbled past the entire England team and fully wrecked them. So you got to love that. Did it all while fucking coked out of his motherfucking mind and drunk half the time as well. I mean, you know, I always respect George Best.
People don't know what that era was like, do they? People were just doing whatever they wanted at that time, mate, for sure.
I remember, like, you know, because like it was George Best that invented the crossbar challenge because he was so bloated from all the drinking and so like gassed. When he was practicing his free kicks, he couldn't be asked getting it in the net because after like 3 or 4 balls, you know, this is the old days, he'd have to go into the net and get it himself. So he just started pinging it off the crossbar so it would come back to him just to make his free kick easier. He'd have a pint of Guinness at half time. What are you doing? That's ridiculous. Everyone else was having their oranges. So, you know, I have a tendency, the people I always like are the people who are excellent, but are also extreme lunatics. Like, their excellence is despite the worst aspects of their personality, because it shows almost like, you know, how we're all fucking flawed. Now, of course, everyone loves those legends, but when in the present, you are presented with a flawed individual who might be good at something, nobody likes them in the moment. It's always something you like in retrospect. I think of John McEnroe, to use a tennis analogy as well. You know, John McEnroe was absolutely despised. And then, you know, despised because he would call out umpires. He was right every time, by the way. And then, obviously, when he retired, everyone went, you got to love John. Yeah. And then when he was on the seniors tour, and he would be legitimately getting irate because he was still a fierce competitor. Everyone in the crowd would be going,
look to the crowd to them.
Exactly. Look at him absolutely wrecking this umpire's life. They all loved it, all of us. So, same with Roy Keane, you know. So, it's very, very hard. But the safe bet is obviously just Maradona. His story's amazing from start to finish, and the greatest footballer, despite all of his flaws and problems. Nolan,
another one quickly though,
go on,
is the problem. Like, realistically, as a man, I don't really like have massive favorites of people who play sports. Like, I like the stories though. I'm not a fan in the same set. So I'll just say this: when I was a boy, I've told people the story before. My team was football, Liverpool, obviously. About exactly the time I started following Richard was when fucking Robbie Fowler like became like a fucking rookie, and he was unreal. If people have never seen, there's one of the biggest what ifs ever. If that guy didn't basically get involved with drugs and partying and fuck his own head up, he was unreal, mate. He would have been like the greatest footballer ever from England. He was like the next Shearer for sure. He could score easily.
Great, mate. The greatest ever football celebration of all time in the Premier League when he sniffed the fucking
hilarious
the line on that. He was
I'll say is Robbie. Didn't age well, that one, did it? Because in about 2 years later, you were just an absolute wreckhead who couldn't do anything. And you know the most criminal part about it as well, Richard? I used to be watching those teams going, they're one piece away. And then I saw Michael Owen was coming through the youth team. And I was like, oh, shit, imagine if they get... And I'm not even joking, go look. They had one season where Robbie Fowler still had his head together with Michael Owen.
Yeah.
You daft cunt. We could have literally run the table on those wankers at Man United and won all the Premier Leagues. And you had to enjoy cocaine. I enjoy cocaine responsibly, motherfucker. Listen, kids. Whatever.
So yeah, Nolan says which player besides Ziwu and Simple has the best chance of being the #1 player in 2022?
I mean, it feels like the other name that always goes with them is a pretty good shout, like Nico. He's already in the team, isn't he? Like, he basically only has to go up, like, 10% of his game, and he's probably there. He's a good one. Who else? Shiro's not a bad one. Obviously, Rop's good.
All right, still. Yeah,
Rop's all on the right team. These are all in the mix for sure.
I mean, we don't know how Gambit are going to bounce back from that taste of being the #1 team and having a bit of a disappointment and a lot of pressure put on them. So, but I mean, I think that roster's phenomenal. I mean, I think you could say Shiro, Axel, both are in with a really, really good shout.
They better keep that core together. That core should play together for like 5 years.
Oh, well, I mean, let's hope Counterstrike's around in 5 years. But yeah, I get your point for sure. I wouldn't want to rock that boat. It's got the potential to be a great core, like one of the all-time greats. If it can just, this is the rocky period now. But yeah, I mean, I think they're in with a good shot. I'm trying to think of anybody else really. I mean, you're right though, Rob.
If they get his shit together, maybe Device and Nip's not impossible.
Yeah, you know. I think that's it, really, because it's like you don't understand to be #1 in place of Simple.
I know you got to do a lot, haven't you?
I don't even know who it is because it isn't even Ziwu now. So if it isn't him, like you might want to say, well, it could be Elise. It won't be. Twist. Not going to be him, good Rops, yeah, but no, he's not even that kind of player, so I think you do have to plump for either Nico because he's been there before, or one of the Gambit guys because the things they do is fucking absolutely crazy. So I appreciate the question, Nolan. Reykjavik on Steam. Now the PGL major won't be hosted in Sweden. That's not confirmed. And say that they're in contact with 2 European countries. What's the likelihood Valve would contact Boris Johnson so the major can be an experimental tournament set in Sunderland to see if rats spread COVID? I mean, you're ticking all the esports boxes.
The problem with that suggestion is you don't understand. Like, as far as I know, Valve has no track record of contributing to the Conservative Party. So that deal wouldn't make any sense, would it?
Yeah, exactly.
See what I did there?
Yeah, it's good. No, I mean, I think I know it's just a throwaway question. I think obviously if we get one in Bucharest. I've got to say, listen, I've been to Bucharest a lot of times with my esports travels. Always, I think, in some capacity with PGL. And, despite the hardships the country's seen historically, obviously, again, the Ceausescu regime, I grew up in a time when people were still feeling the seismic effects of, the Romanian people that were displaced and the orphans from all the parents that were killed by that awful, foul regime. And Romania's, struggled to bounce back, but it's a beautiful country. And it's got, every time I've gone there, PGL have rolled out the red carpet. The people have been amazing. The fans have been amazing. Some of my best memories are from events at PGL and in Romania, and some of the best nights out partying were in Romania too. So personally, if we end up in Romania, I'll be traveling to go to that major myself as a fan, because I think it's a fantastic, I wouldn't look at it like, oh no, if it's not in Stockholm, it's not worth going to. I wouldn't feel that way at all. So I hope if Stockholm doesn't come to pass, which obviously is the optimal one we all want, then for me, Bucharest is a wonderful alternative. Carv, I'm attempting to write an esports sci-fi novel, but struggling to find a theme. Can you guys help? Should it be about 1, Nicola Nyholm finds cursed monkey paw and wishes for the best Danish team, but doesn't get the best Danish player? 2, a Twilight Zone style escapade featuring DDK, who becomes the best freestyle rapper in the world, but he can only speak German. I don't even know what that's a reference to. 3, Brazilian CSGO fans throwing homophobic abuse on Twitter are revealed in a plot twist to have been closet homosexuals themselves all along. Or 4, is the true unspoken Lovecraftian horror the full unabridged chronology of esports since it was invented by Bobby Kotick in 2016? Listen,
tasty menu, pretty good.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, for me, listen, you're getting away from sci-fi and just these are horror. Like if you actually,
or something, isn't it?
It's like, I've been because I had to go back and start rewriting that stuff after my hard drive break. But like the stuff I'm writing, it's like I'm getting angry as I'm writing it about esports. I'm writing this fundamental history of all of the failures of esports, and how it's just become an industry of fucking ringed out cunts and losers and liars and thieves and beggars and it's oh, help me VC company, oh, Chinese government, give me more money so I can use my game as a conduit for pure evil. Ooh. I hate it. I hate what the industry is now, and I think if you start like I've just finished the chapter on it's just called the working title. I'll fix it up later, but just the banality of corruption, and it's just talking about how everyone clapped like circus seals when FaZe was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and then a week later they're embroiled in a huge crypto pump and dump scam, and everyone acts like, oh, FaZe members involved in scams. That's not happened. It's like you shouldn't have been cheering them on in the first place. You should, but nobody cares. The bottom line is you can get away with any kind of unconscionable behavior as long as you're big enough to make money for other large entities. That's all it is. That's all it's become. It's like it started out as a marketing. Well, it didn't start out as a marketing idea, but we realized we could get money by making it in a marketing idea, and then we ended up with this. So yeah, the ultimate. If you want to do horror, it's 4. If you want to do sci-fi, I don't know why TTK is rapping in German, mind. I mean, that sounds like fucking Das Lawnmower Man.
I assume the joke there was like, of all the languages to be able to speak and be like a really good rapper in German would be one of the worst, because I'm assuming they don't have like the best hip hop scene or whatever. No one would understand it. I assume that's the angle of the joke there,
Yeah, maybe.
I certainly sometimes hope when I hear DDK rapping that I don't understand the English he's, language he's rapping in, but sadly can't be spared from that one. Can
I? J-Dubs says, with Hicham Chahine publicly lobbying the Swedish government to keep the major in Stockholm, why hasn't he mentioned the critical point that Nip wouldn't be able to attend at the new location because Romania is slightly to the east of Stockholm? Now that is a straight fire reference from J-Dubs, obviously a reference to Device not being able to travel in one direction because it makes him ill and tired and sleepy. So pretty good. First off, who was your greatest stand-up comedian of all time, and what was characteristic of their style? I think we've talked about this before. Well, I mean, look,
okay.
Yeah, I think so. Because I mean, I think
we did actually. Because I think we went through a whole bunch of them. Yeah.
The problem you've got with stand-up is, truly great stand-ups are timeless. Yes. Because the problem you've got with a lot of stand-ups is their material is about things that are happening now. And so it's only the truly transcendent comedians that make it because time's cyclical, the same things happen again, that make the things they're talking about, the broader architecture around the little minutia, right? That is what makes it great. And so it's like, you look at someone like, say, Cat Williams, funny guy. But I'd defy anyone, go back and watch some of his specials and he'll make specific references to a song that was out at that time, or a hip-hop artist that was popping off at that time, or a news story that happened at that time. And the whole bit is a waste of time because you can't remember that detail because it's got lost in the ether. It wasn't that big. It's like, it's why the scary movies are so bad, because, it's like, why is that
pop culture references?
Yeah, it's pop culture references. So it's like, when that guy, Again, go watch it. I think it's like Scary Movie 3 when they're doing that. What's that? Remember that fucking stupid Budweiser commercial? They do a whole skit on that, and it's like no one is going to remember a Budweiser commercial 10 years from now.
Yes.
So what you have to get is you have to get the comedians that are either doing material that is in and of itself evergreen, timeless, and connected to the human condition. I think George Carlin, for example, someone like that. Or it has to be, they're talking about specific historical events, but actually the framework within which they tell the joke exposes some secret truth about the universe. And so I've always said it's Bill Hicks. It will always be Bill Hicks. It's a shame that there isn't as much of a body of material.
Yes, that's the main knock.
Because if we just got more out of him, it wouldn't even be up for debate.
But I've read a trajectory. He was going to do what Carlin did again.
Yeah, I mean, I've read all of his essays, and all of his unpublished material. Seen even that fucking transcript of the pilot show he did for Channel 4, and we were robbed of something.
Oh, for sure.
Very special.
He was just in his prime.
So I mean, there's obviously others, but what I hate is when I look at these lists and I see comedians from like the 70s where you can't penetrate what they're talking about because you weren't there. And it's same with the 80s, a lot of that in the 80s. I know you're a massive Eddie Murphy fan. I know you fucking.
The problem with that is, though, again, actual body of stand-up work's too small, isn't it? Like, his is ludicrously small. It's like 2 specials, basically. No, the problem I have is this. If I'm going with, like, heart, it's Bill Hicks easily. Like, he just hit everything for me. And even the fact that, even though he didn't have that much material, it is purely timeless. Like, even the shit that, in theory, as you say, sounds like it's a reference to this part of the Gulf War, is a bigger picture about politics and the way people talk. Like, if I'm going on, like, say we did it like players, though, we're judging the whole career, the only two, in my opinion, that can really be there is Carlin and Louis C.K. The body of work these men have is unfucking believable. I'll maybe say outside chance like Bill Burr's sort of coming in, but the problem with that is, to me, I always thought Bill Burr was at his best with sort of like funny, mundane stuff. I don't see him as sort of like, I don't think he hits the same heights as those guys. George Carlin probably is the best, let's be real, like, because the body of work is, he's like one of those fuckers who like played the longest and scored the most points in a game and had all the champions. Like, what more do you want? Like, you can't really hate on the guy, can you?
Yeah, it's like really tough because it's like you say. I mean, if you're talking about people like, because as a purist and someone who like studied it for years, I tell people to go and listen to Lenny Bruce, and they tell me don't ever recommend a comedian to me ever again.
Wouldn't be able to handle it, would they?
Yeah, but and for the reason I'm talking about, like Lenny, but for me, Lenny Bruce is a consummate performer with an incredible eye for what a joke is in and of itself. Like I think if you go and listen to probably one of his best routines about how laws start and how police officers came into being, and it's about primitive beings like in a cave and they're shitting in non-designated shitting areas and stuff. It's fucking great. It's like, it's a really smart bit, but unfortunately it just isn't for everyone. And so you end up, sure, Richard Pryor, obviously. I mean, Pryor is iconic, and what made him truly great was the bit is about his life. It's not about your life. It's observational comedy about his insane, exceptional life. There's a lot of that. And it works because he was such a charismatic guy. It's really hard, man. It's really hard to pick an all-time great. I think Dave Chappelle's getting there as well. I think if he continues where he's going, I mean, like, if I was ranking like all the active ones right now, I agree. I think CK, Chappelle, I would put him above Bill Burr. I think Bill Burr's latest.
Doug Stanhope in there. He should be in the mix.
The problem is, if you go watch Doug Stanhope's last 2 specials,
I will say I haven't seen him for a few years, but he had a good solid 10 years or so, I'd say.
I mean, like, put it this way, those old, unbelievable, like, the ones he did, like, before turning the gun on himself is an all-time fucking classic.
Some amazing shit on
that is straight fire. And, but yeah, unfortunately, his last few are like, that whole bit about, what's it called? Jake LaMotta, how we met Jake LaMotta before he died, and he's talking about that. But then again, it wasn't one of his funniest pieces. This was in Beer Hall Putsch. It wasn't one of his funniest pieces, but he did one about assisted suicide in his own mother.
Right. Oh, I
And
remember that. Yes, I know what you mean.
and he said statute of limitations has gone on it now. And he talks about everything, even like as she was dying, taking a credit card and ordering a bunch of stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You know, that is just great storytelling, and
Sure.
it's funny and tragic and all of that. Is it a laugh? Is it a like laugh till your belly hurts bit? No, he used to do those. He doesn't do that anymore. So it can't be stand up, unfortunately. By his own admission, he's a washed up drunk now. So whatever, you know. But yeah, it's Hicks. It's always Hicks. BP 420. With the recent NBA finals being an obvious aberration, why do Arizona's sports teams suck so much? This is for you.
There's definitely a weird question, because I will say, like, in both hockey and American football, they've had teams that were like good, but they were never really realistically the best. I don't know why, actually. I mean, it's one of those ones where it's hard to figure out what the reason would be. I've actually never understood in general. I'm obviously not hooked into American culture. I've never really understood some of the logic behind why certain areas have mad success and certain areas don't. Like for example, it can't be the whole thing of like big, you know, they always say big market team or whatever. It's like, well, how the fuck are the teams from Detroit a big market team? But they have fantastic history in practically every game except the NFL, basically. Like, they have some unbelievable basketball, hockey teams. So to me, I actually think that whole thing, by the way, is going to hurt people's feelings of like, it's because of this region that they're from. Like, that hasn't existed for about 40 or 50 years. Like, the idea that, you know, the people in any way like inform the spirit of the time, that is like some shit they just sell you now as a nostalgia product because you're a dickhead from that town. Like, realistically, sports about 40, 50 years ago just became cynical franchise things where people bought in because they know this is a spot they can use and market for. It has fuck all the. So I don't really know on that one, actually. I'd be interested to know myself.
It's I don't know. I think it's kind of a harsh assessment because obviously the Phoenix Suns, I mean, I don't think they're like I don't think they're a terrible team. I know they've never won a championship, but I mean,
they've had some very good teams over the years.
Yeah, you know, they've had a bunch of divisional championships. They've never won obviously the big one. Never won the playoffs, but I mean, who else is there? There's the Cardinals.
And then there's the Coyotes in fucking NHL, but they were never actually a very good team. But they were also one of the more newer recently. One off the top of my head, I think they were maybe only started like 30 years ago, so something more of like an expansion team. That's
Cardinals is a tough one as
if you
well.
Go back in time, they used to have that team with Carson Palmer. That was a fucking banging team, yeah.
Like I mean, because like all of their success historically came because were they in the AFL? I always forget. With which teams weren't
I'm not
part
sure
of the merger
before they had the merger, yeah.
But
I think had that year where they had what's his name from the fucking I forget the names now. The one that was on the Rams, who's that quarterback, Kurt Warner, where he came to their team and he took them to the Super Bowl one year, like 2008 or something. So they had a little sort of comeback run.
But yeah, they basically before the merger they had some success, right? I mean,
I don't know the NFL before then, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I don't think the Cardinals are a bad team either by any stretch of the imagination. So I wouldn't say they suck. I mean, you can make the argument that like, they should be better, but but I mean, like again, Arizona, like you said, I know the small market thing's kind of bullshit if you want to build success, but it does play into it because if the crowd isn't there, you know, and the money isn't there, and if the money isn't there, the players aren't there, and if the players aren't there, all of a sudden you're playing fucking Moneyball, and Moneyball was all bullshit to begin with. So whatever. Carve. Now you know it's going to be good. In a cynical cash grab, when can we expect the by the numbers Monopoly set? Players the Rat King, the Land Baseball Hat, or a dozen other recurring characters? Start your exciting esports journey on the low-value squares of Port Talbot in the northeast of England. Maybe you'll land on the toxic community chest and get vampated. Be careful not to go to jail alongside Shara, still trapped and imprisoned under the stage at Cologne. Electric Company might be useful if you're looking to get involved with construction of a planned city in Saudi Arabia. Good news, though, there's always free parking and free admission for the 300,000 people crammed into the Skoda.
There you go. There you go.
You wrote this one, mate.
Right.
Take a chance card by criticising an underperforming CIS team or investigating Chinese match fixing. And as you round the board for home, be careful to avoid the luxury tax, like Flusher did.
Try to This is well done.
Yeah, try to pass go, but remember, kids, only pussies try to win, no matter what. Probably the best submitted question ever in the history of the show.
So, within 5 minutes, it's about 100 times better than the real ESL Monopoly. And then secondly, I do appreciate that he also understands the Tesseract-like quality that the Spore deck has in Carmack's mind, where inside is like bigger than... give me a break, mate. You're fucking so wrong. So wrong.
Yeah. I don't know, mate. It turns out Carv might actually be like an intelligent fan of the show. Incredible. Yeah, great. Not a question, but fantastic submission. We should have probably done some by the numbers merch by now, but it's too late and it's all played out. Whatever, fuck it. Orky, do you enjoy fantasy books? If so, any particular favorites? If not, use this time to shit on Hitcham on my behalf. So, I mean, look, fantasy books, obviously. I watched the Game of Thrones TV series. I was laid up in bed sick for a bit, and I've come to the conclusion that even when it's good, it's bad. But the books, they're all right, they're good, but they're not great. Dune is kind of fantasy. It's very hard to really just say it's sci-fi. It's in a traditional sci-fi setting. It's got a lot of the fantastical elements,
of course.
One of the great fantasy writers that, and certainly a prolific fantasy writer, one of the great fantasy writers that always slips through the cracks is David Gemmell from the UK. Not a lot of people have heard of him, but he wrote a book that I'm sure has been optioned a million times by a million studios called Legend. It's part of the Draenei saga. It's your standard fantasy affair, but he had a good eye for characters. He actually wrote it was a fictitious interpretation of Prince Alexander and Philip II of Macedon and Prince Alexander's life called Lion of Macedon and Dark Prince. And basically what happens is there's a period of time, supposedly, he was doing all this research where, Alexander's unaccounted for, and they say this is like when he was all being military, indoctrinated and trained up and, hanging out with Aristotle and learning philosophy. But what he theorizes in this is that he was transported into an alternate Greece where mythology actually is real, and he learned to fight there because there's a incarnation of his own father, Philip II, but called Philippikos, some demon god, and so he has to kill his own father in this fantasy world. It's actually pretty good, but not great literature, not high literature, but good. He was a big ideas guy, and like all great writers he died at his typewriter, so fucking ripped to a real one. What about you?
I'm not a huge fantasy guy. I tend to be more like sci-fi or just straight normal fiction. But I will say the one that I think often gets missed is the Hyperion books. The first two of those.
Yeah, great show.
Dan Simmons, those are
great show.
And the cool thing is, also, if you enjoy literary stuff, they sort of attempt to go to like a higher level than just like a pulp sci-fi or whatever. So I think it's got a bit of everything for everyone.
Yep. Zumba. What sort of impact did the music of Frag movies have on your musical taste? And are there any musical artists you discovered that way that you would recommend? I'll be honest with you, mate. I mean, like, coming from Source, all the Frag movies I watched, it was all because it was just a land that copyright forgot. I mean, it was all Skillet for starters. Like you better like Skillet, but it was all Linkin Park and fucking Skillet and
all the same shit.
All of that stuff. And obviously, that's not for me, even though I was there at the start of what later became nu metal. And don't you dare include the Deftones in that just because the single Bored had a fucking skateboard in it on the videos on MTV. The Deftones are an incredible musical force. But yeah, I mean, honestly, Frag movie music was whack as fuck. It's one of the reasons why I always like Callisto's Frag movie. He did one from 1.6. He's Jack Frags now, obviously, for those who know. And he did one, and it was set to, what's her name? Is it Sia? You say it? S-I-A?
I'm not sure you say it, I know the song, yeah.
Yeah. And so all his Frag movies were all set to like really slow, tinkly female vocal, calm, slow stuff. So it was a complete contrast to what was the norm at that time, and it was all very, very cleverly done. So, but did it influence me musically? Nah. No,
I would agree. It was all absolute shite. It was not even the good new metal generally, or it was just the worst possible dance music and dubstep and like the shit.
Yeah.
I thought it was garbage. I always felt, by the way, I feel really bad for people from other countries like Russia or something where maybe your English isn't great. You think this music's, oh my God, it's incredible. Say you're going to be a laughing. It's like the story I told you where Cooler told me like Terminator, whatever, fucking Transformers 2 was his favorite movie. And I was like, I literally looked down on you, but all right,
Yeah. So nothing like that. I mean, you have to also understand, like, just frag movies was super derivative. No one was doing anything clever, and the reason they all went and got memory hauled, and you can barely find any of them now, is because it was just all using music with no rhyme or reason for copyright or whatever. So, Watch Doge. This is the last one. The year is 2032. Esports is now a staple at its second Olympic Games. Mark Merrill and Bobby Kotick are co-chairs of the Olympic Committee. The China Chengdu LA Valiant win the Overwatch 4 gold medal, while TSM once again failed to qualify for the Olympics League of Legends. Gaben is still living amongst the Lord of the Rings LARPing troupe in New Zealand, while no Valve games are allowed at the Olympics. At the closing ceremonies, Mark Merrill walks up to the microphone and declares emphatically that the entire Olympics should be happy that his game allowed all of these Olympians to continue making a living in his scene. Bobby Kotick stumbles out of a nearby executive suite with a bag of, I don't know what that is, so I'm not going to say, that were used to buy an Overwatch slot for the new Neon Nomads franchise. So I'm guessing that's a type of
That's
currency.
pretty well done. Pretty well done, the
bad.
Neon Nomads.
Yeah. There you go. Cheers, Watch Doge. Right. People don't even submit questions
just
anymore.
Fanfics at this point.
Yeah.
Fair enough. They were pretty good.
They are straight fire. Right. So obviously, shout out to NordVPN, our sponsors. Go to nordvpn.com/RLS if you want to get a deal. As people were saying in the chat, it's pretty mental right now. I think you get like 4 months free instead of just the first month. So you can literally sign up and get 4 months of a really good VPN free of charge. Be sure to use the referral code so it shows that you support the channel. And a last shout out on By the Numbers. They are sponsoring us until the end of the month. But if you haven't already, do go to .com. One last call for drinks. Go to .com/RLS and sign up there and continue to support them. Make sure you follow them on YouTube. CS. It's been great working with them, and as I said, we'll have some announcements about new sponsors coming very shortly. Nothing personal, just time just keeps on moving. And of course, all our patrons, our $100 patrons, Jerky's Mini and Benakagi, Benedict, Carve, Cathal, Chris, Hannah Maru, Alice, J-Dubs, Marcus Kjumpar, Tobias Bernasconi, Will the Weed Wrangler, and our $50 patrons, Adam Ox, Alex C, A. Rama, Bukowski, BP420, Bacon, Can of Pasito, Carter, C-Mac, Dancer Master, Daniel Magnuson, Echo, Fursock, Frankie, Goody Woody, Gern Kaya, J. Ray, Judas, Miss Alcoholic, Nolan, Norwegian Clamai, Petty Grievances, Reykjavik on Steam, Rez, Sard Sawar, Tim Frost, Lonnie, Watchdog, Zumba, and Zarathenia. Thanks for all the support on the show. We'll be back next week with another episode of By the Numbers. And until then, take care of yourself.